But we don't have those transects, so when you create them,
Exactly.
based on what, tax map? And aerial photos of the houses?
We actually went through the Google Street View. We walked the neighborhoods. And when I say we, Dover Cole, our consultants, obviously helped with putting together these numbers using their experience.
I think there's some audio issues happening right now.
I just changed from one microphone to the other.
Okay,
Okay.
Did I answer the?
Yeah, and so basically your consultants went through, looked at everything.
Yeah, exactly. And, I just want to make the clear distinction that this is a form-based code, right? So we're primarily focusing on the form, regulating the physical form of buildings and their relationship to the street. Less so on the uses within the buildings, but as you'll see, that's also certainly part of the code. I just want to run through a few of the goals. One big priority is for the code to improve housing access and to more broadly legalize what's referred to as missing middle. These are accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes. Now, these are known as light density because they don't have a huge impact when built throughout the city. And what we know is that these were once legal to build in many of Kingston's neighborhoods and already exist in much of the city. We know that these types of housing encourage economic diversity, and that these types of housing typologies have been traditionally a more attainable housing option to lower income middle families. You see here on the left, this chart that's in the code, it basically outlines what building type is allowed in each transect, right? So as you go down from the purple to the green, you'll see that the allowed building typologies changes significantly, right? The more intense buildings being at the top, being more allowed in the T4, T5, and T4 areas, which are the denser areas of the city. Just want to point out, currently, we have affordable housing standards, meaning a certain percentage of units must be affordable. We are carrying that forward with some modifications. These would only apply to projects with 7 or more units. And there's a gradual buildup as you increase in the number of units.
Okay, is that an increase? Because I thought it was 5.
Right, yeah, right now it's 5, right? So
It's changing to 7.
Yes, it's going from 5 to 7. And the primary reason for that is because there's a building type in the code called a small multiplex, which goes up to 6 units. So we felt, and Dover Cole felt as well, that the right threshold to start would be at 7. As always, we're also looking at the economics of building small, right? And so we certainly want to mandate affordability at a certain level, but we don't want to do so in a way that will encourage the development of housing, especially the smaller projects where we know the economics already can be done.
So looking at this, you're raising the number of units for small project, or excuse me, less. Right now it's 5, it's going up to 7, but this 5% work housing at 20 and going up to 10% at 50 or more. So our larger projects are actually going to be required to do more.
Exactly.
Now, what happens to the existing 5 to 6 units that have a housing requirement? If this code goes into place, do they no longer have that housing requirement?
If they were approved under the current zoning code, then their requirements that they're subject to don't change.
they would stay the same.
So
Forever or until,
legally, can you do that if you're bumping up to 7? And then they say, well, wait a minute, I'm a 5, but now the next guy is 6 and he's not required, why am I required?
Well,
I don't know.
Or do you run some measures there, but
I didn't, okay.
well,
exactly, if you may run some measures there, I'm sure that argument is gonna be made.
Yeah.
here's the argument.
I'm just asking, because we've had a lot that have come in, and I recognize the 7, I think it's a good thing, because we've had a lot of smaller projects that are the 5 and 6 units, and when you look at the economics of it, that add that affordable unit, although it's nice, it's a lot of money to get out of the ground at 4 and 5, 6 units, but when you get to the larger units, yes, it's a lot easier to designate.
Yep.
But you are gonna have some, like I can think of one right now that was at 6 and is actually thinking about adding more, but they're gonna turn around and say, wait a minute, why do I have to have this affordable unit if now you're going 7?
Yeah, I mean, here's the argument I'd make, it can't really, if you want to go under the new zoning code, go in under the new zoning code, right? Because you can't pick and choose, right? Because
No,
the
code
projects,
changes.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
We can debate, I don't wanna debate with you, but that's something that council's gonna have to look at, because I'm sure you're gonna have people that say, wait a minute, if you're changing the code, I'm no longer subject to these rules and regulations.
That's something we can look at. I just want to quickly go into talk about a few other housing incentives that we're providing in terms of removal of barriers, and then also go into the administrative process a little bit. So first, in terms of the administrative process, one key thing to point out is that we are proposing to create a new minor site plan review board, all right? And this would be an approval body for smaller, more incremental projects. And this board would be applicable to developments that are deemed to be seeker type 2, development of land less than 2 acres in size, consisting of 1 to 2 lots. Any project that receives a special permit could not go in front of the minor site plan review board. This is meant for smaller projects, right? And projects that meet all the requirements of the code as written.
Lot line revision or something like that.
Exactly, especially for smaller, kind of more integrative changes. This would go through this body instead.
Now, that body, when I read in the proposal, is primarily made up of city employees.
Exactly.
Where are they gonna get the extra time for this increased load? Because right now, some of our city employees are pretty maxed.
Yeah.
Especially the building department, and now when I looked at that, we've got the building department, we've got engineering, we've got planning. Generally, they do weigh in if the planning board has a specific question, but under this particular proposal, they're almost have to review these items on a monthly basis. Where's that time coming from?
I mean, I'm looking at Sue. I mean, I think,
I mean, it's great for the planning board because you're
We-
taking half of our agenda every month
Yeah.
and it's disappearing. So I'm not complaining, but I'm just, the practicality of it is something
Right,
that.
The issue of staffing has come up, from my perspective, in my department, it came up at my budget hearings. And I've already made the statement that, given this new form-based code, when it comes into effect, I believe it's gonna have a very serious impact on my department's manpower. And we'll probably be going to the council looking for staffing support.
Now, the other question that I had when I read this, we always have politics, I mean, it's city hall, there's politics here. When a lot of this stuff came to the planning board, typically the planning board is citizens of the community. And there have been projects that have been political in the past. And at least my time being on the planning board, I think generally the citizens have kind of been a little bit of a checks and balance. With this particular board, if somebody goes through and they're denied, can they appeal and go through the planning board and have it re-reviewed? So that's kind of keeps the checks and balance. Good, thank you.
I just want to mention 2 more in terms of the development strategy and housing. And this goes back to an earlier point I made about picking and choosing, right, because it gets complicated. For instance, we're currently not requiring parking requirements, right? And we also don't have a maximum number of units for certain building types, meaning we define the building envelope, but we don't necessarily say, the max number of units is 20 here. It depends on the building type. But if you'll see that, if you go through the building types, you'll see that certain building types do not have a max number of units. And then in terms of affordable housing, in addition to the mandated amounts that were shown in the previous screen, there's potential for bonus height if you go up to 20% affordability. There's an expedited review process based on affordability. There's also a discount of required site plan fees. It depends on the level of affordability that you're providing.
What is expedited review?
The expedited review, you'll see that in the affordable housing section. That basically says if you're meeting the affordable housing standards, then you're getting priority in terms of the site plan review
In
process.
queue
You go to the top.
of the review.
You still got to meet all your statutory requirements.
Of course.
Where meetings, your
Absolutely.
your county review, so how
Yeah,
do you get faster?
So if I put in an application now and I have no, I'm offering no low-income housing in mine, and then 3 months down the road, you put one in and you are offering it. If I'm here, you're gonna go on top of me and yours is gonna go first.
Yeah, but I understand that in theory, but it's not like staff and everybody looks at one file at a time, that you can just push somebody. I mean, everything, there's so many moving parts and waiting on consultants, waiting on lawyers, and waiting on county comments, and there's so much in a project that even though you want to move it to the top, I mean, Sue's not somebody that can just move to the top and say it's approved. I mean,
Yeah.
There's so many outside factors that she's waiting on
Sure.
from a practical standpoint that it's not really gonna happen.
Want to call out one addition that we made to the final draft in response to a few comments that we were being overly restrictive in terms of the height. And so we are allowing for greater heights in certain areas of the city. And this is along the Broadway and Cornell Streets corridor. These are the places which tend to have the largest and tallest buildings in the city already, and thus present perhaps the most significant opportunity to add new housing. So this height overlay allows up to 6 stories by right on the parcels marked in orange. So wanted to call out this recent change.
Bartek, what's that section all the way to the left? That's highlighted in
That is
teal or
the
whatever.
Fair Street Historic District.
So you can go 6 stories on Fair Street?
No,
No, that's just on the map.
Oh, I see, I see,
Yeah,
the whole way down, yeah.
Yeah,
So what's that, oh, that's Broadway that we're looking at.
right, Broadway and
Okay.
Cornell primarily, the,
So you have this overlay, but then in addition, you have special districts that are for multifamily.
right, the special district multifamily are areas, the special districts are not areas, governed by the transects. So that includes the special district areas, the Kingston Housing Authority.
Right, so so I was looking at those, are those already existing multifamily housing? Or are there certain areas that have been designated special district multifamily that could be developed, or no?
No,
No, I didn't think so.
good question, but yeah.
I don't need to move backwards, but if you're adding these large story buildings and you're adding all this housing, what discussions have been had for parking? Like, where are these people to park?
We have removed minimum parking requirements.
Correct, but
Yeah.
parking's always been an issue with DPW, snow removal.
Yeah.
And just congestion, and obviously Broadway, we have bike lanes, so sometimes.
Well, again, we're not saying that you can't provide parking. What we're saying is that we're not going to mandate a certain amount of parking. Yeah,
I get that, but long-term effect is if you don't mandate it and then you allow all these uses, 10 or 15 years from now, what are we doing to plan for the increase of residents so that we have parking? Like right now, we don't have a problem, but if you institute this in 10 years or 15 years as you develop, you're going to have a problem. So you kind of have to address that now, so you know how to deal with it.
I mean, I think that's maybe perhaps outside the purview of the zoning code. I would argue that the zoning code is not the right place, to set parking policy. I would tend to agree with you that there might be other policies needed to manage the curve, right, in terms of how we're managing parking throughout the city. I'm not sure if the zoning code is the right.
Yeah, but you can't institute a new zoning code that's going to create a parking problem. You have to at least, I mean, that's, you got to look at the city as a whole and say, if we're going to do this, how are we going to provide it in the future?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're instituting something that's going to be a problem in the future.
We've had multiple discussions on this internally, and it is going to be part of a future discussion of this board, because it is in the code, there is a section on off-street parking, and it's with respect to creating a transportation demand study, but it's only required in certain instances, so that's going to be part of a discussion later. But I agree with you. I don't think that at the onset, I know this board has always felt that the parking requirements under the current code are just too over the top.
I agree.
And not necessary. I don't think it was ever our intent or any plan of ours to remove it completely from the mix of a review, because I think, you're gonna have good developers that are gonna say, yeah, I know, I recognize the parking, but you're gonna have the other side of the spectrum too, where they're just gonna wanna put as much on a property as they potentially can, and they're gonna say that they.
Code doesn't require it, so I'm not
Yeah.
required.
Right,
No,
so the
exactly, that's
planning
where I'm
board
with that.
needs some kind of tool when they're doing those kinds of reviews to assist them. And you can't, I don't think you can just let it go and leave it up to a developer.
No, I mean,
The
that's-
planning board's
I mean, we've got
role
one
is
on
to
our-
ensure
Yeah,
that that's covered.
I mean, we've got the new multi-housing project over on Cornell Street.
Mhm.
I mean, they're gonna provide parking, but in theory, that particular property is in this height development, think of it as a 6-story building. Use all the space within the parameter and just say park in the neighborhood. There's no parking required.
What we see from cities that have ended their minimum parking requirements is not that developers don't provide parking. It's that they provide a little less parking. And they tune the amount of parking that they provide to the demand that they think they'll have.
Which cities have done away with parking altogether?
So in New York, Buffalo has, since 2016,
Buffalo's huge.
Saranac Lake, the village of Saranac Lake in the Adirondacks. Hudson has also removed the minimum parking requirements. And just in the past few weeks, a number of cities nationwide have ended their minimum parking requirements. I think, minimum parking requirements historically, add cost to
Developer.
to affordable housing, to mixed-use development. They disincentivize the reuse of buildings and disincentivize small business development. So I think that was one of the reasons why, we, up to this point, we have not included minimum parking requirements, so certainly that's something you want a closer review. As Stu mentioned, we did include a parking demand reduction strategy, so projects over a certain threshold would have to describe how they're planning on meeting anticipated parking demand, description of any strategies that will be employed to reduce that parking demand. And that parking demand reduction strategy would have to be approved by this body as part of a major site plan review process. To Stu's point, that is currently a tool that is proposed.
So one of the questions that I've heard a lot from my constituents is, we live, Ward 7, it's mixed. We have, big roads, but a lot of off-street parking. Now, if my neighbor, looking at the way things could be done, my neighbor sells his house to a developer, the developer levels it, builds a sixplex right next to us, and offers no parking, now I have, let's say, 2 cars minimum, now there's 12 cars on our road. Because, and I'm not even talking about the city where you have to look around for parking, I'm talking about quiet residential areas where, you know, you can tell if someone's having a party or a gathering by the amount of cars that are on the road, and now this is gonna be a consistent basis where there's cars parked on the road, and then have we thought about, as it was mentioned earlier, you know, how this is gonna impact the plowing and everything like that, and garbage. And it's just, you know, by not setting parking requirements, it's like, okay, well, it's a free-for-all. And there's reasons why people buy houses in certain communities because they don't want that. It just, honestly, this just seems like it's, we focused in the city, and then the outskirts, it's like, okay, well, no big deal.
Yeah, well, again, the transects are from the continuum of urban to rural, right, and everything in between. So I think they take into account, you know, the existing character of neighborhoods and ensuring that new development generally fits within how that neighborhood currently looks. Now, I think the scenario of what you described, I mean, I don't know if that's, you know, how likely that is to actually happen.
I mean, if you have let's say you have a neighbor who's got 10 single-family houses and 3 of them decide to convert to duplexes. You got a husband and wife that are renting an apartment, or a boyfriend and girlfriend, you just added 8 cars to the block with no off-street parking requirements.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not hard to conceive, because you're, again, purposes to infiltrate, purposes to provide affordable housing, but when you're doing that, you're now putting more traffic on the street, you're putting more cars in the street. Again, we talk about manpower, DPW is gonna need more manpower to get garbage, there's gonna be cars in the way.
yeah, I mean, I think this gets back to what is the right balance, right? Because we know we need more housing, right? And so what is the right balance? How much development do we want to allow?
But to piggyback on that, and I'm sorry, but it's, you know, we're saying we need more affordable housing, but a lot of these areas are zoned for 6 max when the limit is now 7. So we're disguising this under the veil of we're offering low-income housing, but for the majority of these areas, it's not even gonna apply. So again, using my neighborhood, for example, my next door neighbors could easily sell their house to a developer levels it, builds 6 units, charges $2,500 to $3,000 per, and that does nothing to affect the low-income housing aspect of things. But a lot of these zones outside of Broadway, that's how they're developed. So where is the benefit of having the low-income housing when a lot of these zones that make up the majority of the city of Kingston aren't even applicable for low-income housing, especially now that it was raised to 7?
Well, I think the neighborhood that you're describing is a T3 neighborhood, and the max number of units in the building is 4. All right, if they provide 2 affordable units, then they can go up to 6.
And I live in a T3 neighborhood, and in a 10 or 12 block radius, there's about 3 duplexes. Or excuse me, there's about 3, 2 families. The rest are all single-family houses.
So I do agree with
I mean, to me, that,
Assume
I
that
consider that
maybe
more rural.
parking is going to be a separate meeting, which would fall under our next meeting. This one, we are gonna talk about the types of buildings that can be in each zone, how many units can be in each of those buildings, but I think parking conversation could easily take over, yeah.
Thank you. Cleveland Public Speaking.
Encourage,
As soon as he does it, they're gonna come out this week. There's not enough space.
yes.
There's no room, nor are there sidewalks.
Well, there are no sidewalks,
Yeah,
and
and we
that's,
talk about trash pickup. All the trash units have to be on the curbside. And you think the trucks with the arms now can easily access, I don't think that would be an issue, when you follow the rules. But, yeah. So we now get the problem.
So food for thought, our next one, we can make sure that our next workshop, parking will be probably one of the central topics. Okay?
I just have like 2 slides left.
Okay.
So short-term rentals, this has been a big topic of public discussion. just wanted to note that we completely changed our approach to this in the final draft. We are limiting the amount of short-term rentals allowed on one lot to one. We're also setting a cap on the number of whole unit rentals to 1% of the city's housing stock, which equates to about 100 short-term rental permits. Whole unit rentals are also limited by transit zones specific to T4 and T5 only.
The short-term rentals, you're talking about like Airbnb?
Exactly, yes,
So they're only in the T4 and the T5 now,
correct. Yes.
not citywide, okay? And they don't have to be owner occupied anymore, correct?
They do not have to be, owner occupancy is not.
And the reason for that change, because that was a 2021 legislation, the reason for that was because it was deemed not.
Yes, there was a decision in New Orleans that struck down that city's short-term rental statute, and that was part of why we changed the purchase.
And Bartek, just another question on that. So if you're renting rooms within your house under short-term rental, are you only allowed one room per?
So if it's a room, that is not considered a whole unit rental. In the case of renting a room, that's allowed citywide, and there's no cap on the number of those permits.
And there's no cap on the number of rooms within that home,
It's one per lot,
one room within the home.
yes.
Okay,
Because I thought somewhere I read where it said it had to have a kitchen, a bathroom, blah, blah, blah. To be
For short-term rental.
a short-term rental. And not.
there's different definitions of short-term rental, I think, right? One is whole unit, one is room rental, and then one is owner occupied. I think there's a couple definitions within that definition.
Just wanted to call out a few other quick changes. We are legalizing corner stores throughout most of the city. We did add some language in the final draft around the hours of operation and other operational aspects of corner stores. We did pay special attention to the waterfront area. The translects compared to the current zoning code, really reflect the city's open space network as proposed in the open space plan of 2018. I'm gonna end there.
Why corner stores in every neighborhood?
Not every neighborhood, but most neighborhoods up to T3.
But some of the existing neighborhoods, if you look at all the corners, are single-family residential houses. So why do we want them to be converted to corner stores?
We're allowing for corner stores up to T3, and I think they could serve an interesting role, in a walkable city where services are relatively nearby.
I mean-
One of our,
Sorry.
go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
No, personally, I live in the neighborhood where there's Terry's, and, if there were more Terry's-like stores, there's stores like that, say on Wall Street, I'm just thinking of various neighborhoods, maybe there's one at Cedar. It's a place for people to gather, and it's a place where you can walk to. I love being able to walk to Terry's and get milk. Just the
Yeah, I'm in a
convenience.
residential neighborhood that has no corner stores, but I'm only a block and a half from Stewart's on Albany Avenue. That is a
Well,
different.
the Stewart's is your corner
Is
store.
your-
Stewart's
is
is
your
your
Terry's.
But that's in a commercial district, Albany Avenue. So my neighbors in my neighborhood don't want a corner store. They'd rather walk the block into the commercial district and go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's.
But not every neighborhood has that.
Yeah, and I don't think this is like promoting corner stores, it's just allowing for them. So there's a certain threshold
I
that
mean-
would be required population to even justify. There was a
Well, what
corner
are the
store in
standards? There's no
my.
standards for corner stores, so it can go in any neighborhood, in any corner.
Right, but-
From a corner store, a block away from stores.
But under the code, they're allowed to.
Oh, they
They
can,
could.
but
I mean, with Vigando's, like down in my
Competition.
neighborhood, and it's been vacant for years because apparently there just isn't enough need for that corner store to reopen. I hope that's something it does, but it's been vacant.
Yeah, the final thing I'll just say, and then I'm gonna stop talking. The Friends of the Historic, oftentimes we're looking in the past for inspiration. We did so in this code. The Friends of Historic Kingston published a great article called Historic Mom and Pop Stores of the City of Kingston. and cataloging, dozens and dozens of corner stores that used to exist in the city of Kingston, not just the current city. So that was one inspiration. Thank you all for listening.
Great.
For the close review.
Thank you. Bartek needs to go to a different meeting, so I don't know if anybody has any specific questions, more for him. Here's a
I'm
chairperson.
sure we'll make a list.
Yeah, but we will certainly be in touch, Bartek, and maybe, if you're available at our next session in the beginning, we can talk through some of the questions that come out of our discussions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so, I guess to go forward, I had, I've done a couple of things, looking at this Kyla has as well. I know we sent around, the topics that we wanted to cover this evening. So we want to just start there at the top. Kyla can put up on the screen anything from, the code that we need to look at. The first article.
I'm probably gonna put up the critics page maybe, so if you want to see specific
Yeah,
map locations. But if you want something else up, let us know. But this, just so you know, this lets us pull up, like if you wanted to see the different districts, we can pull up,
Love the Fair Street District.
like this shows the zoning district, so historic districts.
Did any of those, are all of those mirrored off the current code, or did they get expanded to this?
those are the current.
And they're staying with the current, nothing's
Yes.
expanding or changing?
Yeah, these are,
Because the Fair Street Historic District is only St. James Street on to the end of Fair Street.
No, you mean up through the stockade?
Correct.
No, it does not.
Which is
No,
what's shown on
no,
that map.
stockade was first and Fair Street.
No, I'm saying Fair Street. Fair Street, I think, only goes from St. James Street down. I don't think it goes all the way up.
Correct, right.
That's not what's shown on that map. That
Um,
map
no, there's that overlap.
yeah, there is.
That's
an
correct.
overlay
goes between St. James Street and
Mhm.
further up.
Right there. This is the current code.
That's the current zoning, so it goes to Main
Here
Street.
is overlap, the gray and the blue.
Sure.
Yeah, this is the,
I'm not in the Fair Street Historic District. My building is right between St. James and Nate. None of us have to go through them for approval or anything.
you're between,
Over here? St.
I
James
will
and Mason.
double check the boundary, but that,
Double check the code on that. I don't think that's
we can
right.
double check the boundaries, but that's the way it's always
Fair
been
Street was always,
applied.
you got the county building on Fair Street Historic District.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't think that's correct.
It's before it was designated.
yeah, this is locally designated, so this isn't state or national.
I understand that, but locally, it was it was the old section of the houses that went from St. James Street down towards Franklin.
Okay, we'll double check it. We'll look at the legislation.
I don't believe any of the others are, that's an expansion.
Okay, so what we wanted to start was with the regulating maps. I know that there are a series of maps that are incorporated into the new document itself. Hyla did make some 11 by 17 copies of just the regulating plan. But there are other maps as well that are included. There are some special districts, there are floodplain. There's parks, special requirements maps. Have you taken a look at those? Do you have any questions, in comparison, how they compare, particularly the regulating plan, how that compares with our current zoning map?
Well, that's just-
In looking at the transects versus the districts and the areas and how they've kind of been, put into the new system.
I looked at the map, I mean, obviously the parcel is pretty self-sufficient, flood zone. My only question was, some of the districts like Stockgate, Fair Street, Chestnut, is anybody really taking the time to double check statute and make sure that these zones are properly delineated within this zoning map that's being proposed?
I will double check. Fair Street, I can do, the others I think are fairly accurate from what I've seen, but we'll double check the
Yeah, that's
district
fine.
boundaries, yeah.
Because obviously consultants aren't familiar with plans yet, so.
They use the boundaries that were drawn on the current zoning map. That's what they pulled their document from. So, I mean, to be fair, that's what they were given. Does anybody else have any questions on any of the mapping that is included in the new code? Okay. So then let's talk about the transect standards. I know Bartek touched on that. And if you are looking in the new code, we did have some hard copies Kyla made. If anybody needs it or wants to look at them.
Section.
Just that section?
Just that section. Thank you.
I know that section is quite lengthy, but it does, in that whole section that we asked you to take a look at, it does speak to different uses in the different transects. There's also dimensional standards in there that go through the different transects, giving you the lot standards, building heights, the parking footprint, all the lot and bulk requirements for each of the transects. I don't know, are there any questions on how it's organized? Do you have any concerns with the different types of transects that are being created?
So the conservation one,
The T2 or the TD1? There's natural and a.
well, natural basically seems like no development. Conservation seems like a combination of development mixed with conservation. Right?
The reverse. Hang on a second.
T2 allows for
Yeah,
Yeah. And T1 is preservation of open spaces.
right. That was the question that we got into with the Kingston Meadows project,
Yeah.
where it was incorrectly identified in
Right.
the county.
I still think,
Okay, well, that's not what we're here with.
no, but I just still think floodplains, should be developed. I question that being a conservation district, but that's just.
That property, or you're
No, just-
questioning that
I'm
there should be
questioning
a conservation district that
within a
allows
floodplain.
for development in a floodplain?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I'm
all
not
right.
talking about Kingston Meadows anymore, but it's.
Okay, I got it.
It's about,
Okay.
really, it's more the question of developing in a floodplain.
So are
It's not a
you,
floodplain.
so you would be advocating that there not be like a conservation district then, or I'm trying to.
That a
figure out.
floodplain should be more like, it should be more of the natural.
So anything
definition.
within, 100, 500, your floodplain should be
I'm just questioning
the
how that
T1
occurred.
natural altogether and
Yeah.
not allow for any development.
So I did pull up just those
Extremely
districts, so you can
restrictive,
see.
There's very limited circumstances where you can still develop even T1 apple.
Right.
And I guess my question is like, we look at T1 here, I mean, obviously. Do we know who owns these particular properties? I mean, these individual property taxpayers that we're now basically taking property right away from them?
Well,
Or
if
these
you're
all-
looking at this map up on the screen, you can see where your T1 naturals are.
Yeah, but that, I
A
never,
good portion of like the AVR project site is
which is
T1
owned
natural,
by
it's all
Cedar Cuts.
park, it's all park now.
Correct, I
Right.
mean, did anybody go
Um,
through these different districts and see if individuals own these properties that are no longer gonna be able to build or do anything? And how does that play in legally? I mean, if it's already a park, it's a park, if it's already, open space is open space, but if you're taking a taxpayer's property and now basically saying you can't build on this property, where does that leave the city?
That's a question for
Yeah.
Bartek. I
That's a
don't know that anybody actually went through and looked at, property ownership.
Like here through here, I think this is Tilcon's property through here, isn't it? Do they still,
No, that's the
Do they still-
business park.
that's, so no, this is the park, but does Tilcon own any of those around there?
No, the business park property proper has a area of a non-disturbance that was part of the seeker process. So the area around the perimeter of the actual building sites in the business park has to be left forever natural.
Is that
That's what
all the
that
gray-
T1
Is that all the gray area there?
Up,
Like
well,
up-
the inner, the light gray is where business park development sites are.
Right.
And then the T1 around that is that natural area. That was the area of non-disturbance based on the seeker
Okay.
review process there. Above that is where now it's obviously owned by the state,
Right.
and that's the state park.
Yeah.
And that was all of the AVR property.
The only other area is like right through here then, right?
Yes,
What, T1 natural?
Yeah.
Well, there's this, this dark green here,
Well, that's owned by the state, right?
right,
Or, yeah.
yeah, that's on mine.
There's a place where you can see who owns the parcel, each parcel on this fundraiser.
Yeah, I don't know that we should really concentrate on who owns them, is that,
yeah, we
it's not.
never did.
So,
No, not this meeting, I'm just saying that that's something that,
But, I do not know, I mean, I do know that some property owners, during the course of the public comments, review periods, certain property owners did come in and argue that they did not like the designations of their specific property. So I mean, the maps and the transects were put out there and comments did come through and changes to the maps did occur based on responses to those comments being brought forward. To get every single property in the city of Kingston correct, it would be,
no, I get it, I just
Unrealistic
see a big section T1, I don't know
Right.
what's in that tax map, I don't know if that's one property or there are 30 properties within that section. So I just wanna,
Yeah, that's
really
the-
look at
I
it.
would say that the
That's
one
the
to the
state
north
park.
is pretty much all one, that is the state park. And then you've got the area around the business park, which is based on a seeker document that is not changing. And that is one ownership, and then you've got the area, it looks like in the,
It's like Casper Park,
no, you got, well, that's in the Wilbur kind of West O'Reilly area. You've got
Yeah,
the land trust, a lot of that, I believe, is land trust property.
And the Cave Conservancy.
that looks like Montrose Cemetery.
I don't think there's too many owners.
Now, it says allowed building types in the T1, and that's approved by city. That's a broad statement there, isn't it?
Where,
He's looking at
what page
T1.
are you on?
T1 natural,
T1 natural?
3.3, T1 natural, where it says allowed building types.
Yeah, as approved by the city. So is that what, that by special permit, through the planning board, or was it?
Uh,
Right here, Susan.
I see.
Yeah, that might be because of the large lot section. Because most of these would fall under which is a separate section for parcels that are over a certain acreage. But it does say, limited structures and buildings, building placement varies.
We want to take each of these one by one? You want to take these one by one, discussing, or what?
You can, if that's what you want to do them. I mean, I don't,
I just don't, I mean, I don't.
so there's a lot of documentation here, so, I mean, we can go through them one by one.
I mean, I think there's some districts we
Starting-
may make sense, and there may be other districts that we have concerns on.
Okay.
I think it's good to start with those two, though. If anyone has any, Emily brought up a concern with the floodplains, but if anyone else has anything on the conservation districts, maybe we want to start with those? Or do you want to move on?
Kyla, do you have those tags?
Yes.
Can I borrow any, set of them?
You want?
She bought a whole bunch.
Great.
I have my own little yellow sticky notes, but these I,
Your son of
these
a-
will be from tonight, so
Claire,
I don't know.
I got mine at the bottom.
Okay. All right. So, all right, so we can go to, we'll start with the T5 main on page 3.2. And just as a general comment, one of my notes is that throughout this code, when a final version is finally printed and put out there, on the pages, like we have in our current code, I want the section of the code, so section 405 point whatever should be on each page. Because in here, it doesn't give you a page number, it refers to another section. And it's very difficult when you're trying to look through the document and figure out where that is. Sometimes you gotta go 3 or 4 pages to find a section
Will
and figure out where you're going.
will the city ever be able to create a website for this?
Oh, this will be up on the, yeah, this will
So you can
ultimately
put
be,
in an address and then it'll go to the Transact and then it'll
That's-
follow up with the.
that's the GridX system
Yeah,
that
that's-
Kyla
that's
has
what
us
this
on
will-
right now.
Okay.
And that is part of the whole
'Cause this
package.
is
Yeah, right.
a lot.
So there's commercial.
One thing just quickly with the GridX before we go on is that is a software program that is part of this package. There will be training and I've asked the planning board members to be part of that training.
Okay.
Alright, so you will get a training.
Districts.
Okay? Okay. Okay. Good. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of with the transects.
The T5
The
column.
T5, Main Street on page 3.2, we'll look at them as they're kind of laid out. Starting there in that summary form. So you have T5 Main Street, it talks about the intent of the transect. It is pretty much what its name says it is. It is,
It's primarily our row buildings from like the late 1800s. They're all connected like a way.
right, so you've got the Broadway corridor primarily, you've got downtown,
Yep.
Lower Broadway, okay? The uses primarily ground floor commercial, mix of commercial and residential on the upper floors, which if obviously you all are aware that we have a mixed use overlay district right now in several areas of the city. That mixed use overlay is going away. It will no longer be, so you're gonna have the transects now that will incorporate those kinds of uses. So we're removing some layers in some instances.
So what
Okay.
you're saying, certain transects just are mixed use, so
Mhm. Yes. Then the way this summary table is broken down, there are some primary characteristics and then allowable building types. The building types, obviously are something we didn't include in this, to ask you to review tonight. There's a whole section. The form-based code is very visual. And there's a lot of architecture, a lot of streetscape, a lot of design built into this code that we don't see in our current code. So it becomes, I think, a much more involved, in-depth document, but provides, I think, a good sense of what character we're looking for. Any questions on the main street?
Nope.
Kyla's put
I'm just gonna
something.
I'm just gonna pull up what we're looking at so you can see the use table. If you go ahead 2 pages,
Okay.
there's a use table. So if you wanna go back and forth, you can see what uses will be allowed in each. I can pull that up so that you don't have to flip back and forth.
Right, the use table starts on page 3.6.
I mean, the 3.4 and 3.5, that means nothing to me as a planning board member. I assume that was my question to him, that they had consultants that came in and based on other municipalities, this is all pretty much standard, and then we know if they did something really
That's-
wrong.
Basically your new lot in bulk table, okay, that will be used, it'll be used by our office a lot.
No, but I mean,
To determine major, minor.
but what I'm saying is this, all of these figures were developed through professional consultants that are aware of other municipalities throughout the state. And this is
With-
the average of what
with-
people do.
Consideration of the existing building stock throughout the city of Kingston and what, looking at Kingston too. I mean,
Correct.
looking at what we have.
But I mean, you've kind of looked at this and
Yeah.
it seems nothing strikes you as odd. I'm looking at it,
Sometimes the building heights are a little, intrepid, but I think, I do think, along Broadway, I think 6 stories is not so horrible, on Broadway.
But now we're doing 6 stories uptown, right? I mean, in theory, let's say the Kingstonian, that's what, 3 stories? So they could go up another 3 based on this new code.
I don't know that goes to there. That is still in the historic district, so that still is regulated, that
Is that regulated?
by the,
The
yeah,
height of the,
that section of the historic code did not change.
Okay,
Okay,
that is my question, that's what,
that did not change.
So just to clarify, just because you asked me and I also don't know the question, where they have the principal building height and then they have the special height, that includes the 2 bonus stories where this bonus stories. So it's still like the max, it will never be like 8 stories, it'll always be 6, correct?
No, that's that special height overlay that he showed before along the Broadway corridor.
So that could then be 8 stories or that?
No.
Yeah, because you see where it says
It was the
six max, but then it says 2 stories underneath it.
Yeah,
But I thought he said it was 4 with 2 max,
yeah.
making a total
Okay,
of
so yeah,
6.
so just to make it clear,
Yeah.
yeah, the principal height and then with the two bonus, the potential bonus height, that's where that.
Right.
That
because it says in parentheses, maximum stories.
Oh.
I don't know, that's something that make sure you clarify. What the bonus height is, if it's inclusive of the max height.
He said it, but I could see the gray area, and that's where.
It's a little clearer on the next page where it says principal building minimum, or principal building height 2 minimum, 4 maximum, and then it says special height overlay 6 max, potential bonus height 2 stories. So it's a little bit clearer on that page that the bonus height is the 2 stories.
But the thing that I don't get, and then if you go to the T5N where it says 3.5 max is the principal height. but then it says special height overlay, maximum 4.5, but it
That's
says.
why I think that is a special height overlay that he had up on his slide, that Bartek showed on his slide. That's a
Yes.
separate,
Okay, that's a separate,
That's
Yeah.
a special height overlay was Broadway, and it was also moving down.
Cornell.
Cornell.
but then with the potential bonus height of an additional 2 stories in each of these districts.
I think that is a potential additional 2
So for
stories.
eight.
That's the way
Okay,
I understand it to be. Yes, so 8 is what you could potentially look at.
What's the county building?
6. County building
Yeah,
is
6.
6, yes.
6 is the top level.
6'4".
So you put an eight-story building in an overlay district with no parking.
I think it's 6 max.
I think it's, I think you said 6 max.
Yeah,
I'll double check it, but
we had that conversation when it was gonna go from 4, there was a decision between giving the 1-story bonus or the 2-story bonus, 5 or 6.
right, but that was for the
No.
waterfront, that wasn't for the
No,
Broadway
Broadway,
corridor.
I don't think there's ever been an intention of being 8, we'll double check, but I really think 6 is the max. I'm not sure about Matt's question, and I'm wondering if that's a typo.
The question we have here is
What is the total maximum,
What
the total maximum is going to be?
What it said 6 max.
Yeah, 'cause it says 6 max, but then, right, it could just be the way they worded it, because it looks like it's 6 max, but you can get 2 as a bonus, which makes it 8
And what's the bonus? What class?
if you, low income.
Now,
Do local now.
what is this,
Affordable
you
housing.
had mentioned, Sue, this, parking reduction strategy, which I know we're gonna talk about parking, but is that something that has yet to be determined? Which zone would require
It
you?
is, right now, the way it is set up, it's something that the city of Buffalo had that we saw when we were looking at other elements of their code. And I liked it, so we looked into it a little further. It would be something that would be applied only in the case when major site plans are reviewed. And there are some standards. It's only when, right now, the way it's designed, it's only when there's like a 10,000 square foot footprint
Gotcha.
being built,
So whether it
which
be,
I think
whether it be
is,
residential, whether it be commercial,
Right.
or it be industrial, when you hit a
Right.
certain square
So
footage, it
I-
triggers this stuff.
right, so I will get into more discussion about it, but I don't think that I think that should be reduced. I think that's a awful high square footage, footprint wise. If it were total square footage, you're talking a 5,000 square foot, 2-story, if it's total square footage, gross square footage, that's one thing. But when you talk about footprint, you look at the city of Kingston, it's pretty, you're not gonna have it applied that often.
So that's the T5. T5, we flex a neighborhood.
Right, so. I don't know if anybody wants to look at the uses allowed in the T5 as we go through each of the transects, if you want to look at the uses.
Anytime you see the SP, the special permit, that has to come before planning board.
Correct. Special permits come to the planning board, require public hearings.
Looks like everything that comes before our board will be a public hearing then, right?
I'm sorry?
Everything that will come before our board will be a public hearing.
Everything, every major, yes, that's another distinction now. Every major site plan that goes to the planning board will be a public hearing.
Because I was looking at that flow chart,
Mandatory.
that looks like everything on our agenda will be a public hearing.
Correct.
And so, like under residential ADUs, so that's a piece of permitted use that does not have to come.
Correct. If it's a P, you, by right, you have the ability to do it, you don't need approval.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't do site plan.
For an ADU,
Huh?
for an ADU? Is that
If
what
it's permitted, you wouldn't have to do site plan for it, it's permitted use in that zone. Good, you have the right to do it.
I just thought it has to meet building safety regulations and that's it.
My understanding was that it's permitted uses by right, you don't have to go before planning, it's a special, that's a special permit, then that triggers the planning board review.
I think it's a,
And I
there's
think
different
you need a special
thresholds.
permit.
There are fresh,
There
yeah.
are things that site plan review applies to, but you don't need a special permit.
Major site plan applicability, development of land and structures beyond applications defined as minor site plans. Majority of the minor site plan. It's not done with, but
But that's the thing, so a lot of that, like, that accessory dwelling, unit, that's gonna be on a, not on.
So in other words,
That's
like
gonna
a,
be
a gas station or a
Well, that's
sewer
different.
is might be a permitted use. It
Correct.
still has to come through the planning board
Yes.
process, but it's going to
But
be,
he's talking about accessory dwelling units, that's something that don't even come before us, that's gonna go before your small board.
It might not even be that, it's just if it meets,
No.
New York State Building Code, that's all it needs, as far as.
They're gonna go down to the building
Space.
department, say it's a permitted use, building department's gonna say yes, apply for a building permit, they're gonna do what they need to do and close it out. There's no parking requirement that comes before us.
That's what I was led to believe earlier
Are you
discussion.
talking about ADUs or are you talking about?
ADUs.
Oh,
Does the corner store require site plan approval?
it depends on size,
So I take my house, convert it to
if
Local
it's
store,
categorized
I don't
as
need
type
parking.
2, no, it doesn't.
our agenda's gonna get thin.
Looking through other definitions, I see the term VUNERV. Where are they gonna be located? These are the,
that's under the street standard section.
yeah, pedestrian dominant street encourages multimodal transportation and shared pedestrian vehicular space through urban design techniques. So,
There's a map of street standards.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be, we didn't really highlight street design standards for this, so I didn't
You're
study
outside of the,
it as much as the other sections.
we're focusing on, that's another meeting.
Yeah.
all right, I'm just,
We gotta kind of stay on
Well,
what we're talking about.
well, I'm looking at
And we have
which-
to have one conversation in
we're
the room
T5,
at one
I'm
time,
just seeing
please.
which areas of those things will be in, you know?
Okay, are there any more T5 questions? So we covered T5 main, what about T5 flex, T5 neighborhood? Anything in those? So if you look on the map now, you can see now where the T5 flex is the lighter purple on the map, and it's pretty much
Is that easy
forms,
to see?
the area around the T5 Main Street.
Now, I'm just asking, Kyle, because you're more familiar with this, but obviously this is focusing on Broadway, uptown. I'm just looking at the map, Washington Avenue, what zone, when you get down towards like Deep City, what zone is that? Because there's a lot of businesses down there.
It's like T3. Okay.
So Washington Avenue is T4N, T4N.
T4NO
So that's gonna have,
primarily, and
It's gonna
then
be the next,
so that's gonna have less than the T5.
right.
This is where it looks like.
So these are the T5s.
But that zone, according to this chart, the T4 doesn't have duplex, detached house,
T4, yes, it does. T4N, we finished, T5, are we done with T5? Or are we, because Kyla still has this up, so you see where the Main Street area is the darker purple, the medium purple is your T5 Flex, which is centered around the Broadway area and the Cornell Street.
I'm just,
And then you've got the T5N, which is the very light purple. And that's a lot more of the uptown perimeter area and downtown Rondout perimeter areas.
but I'm just trying to understand why parts of Washington Avenue down near the stadium and heading up to traffic circle aren't in a T5 urban center instead of T4 neighborhood.
Well, you want me to pull those up too? Because
Is it because the properties are more spread out there?
well, there's T5, let's see, or T4.
I think T5s were in the more commercial parts of the area, so you've got like the uptown,
I'm looking
downtown,
from Lucas
Broadway.
Avenue out to the city line.
Right,
That to me is commercial. So I'm just trying to understand why it's only T4. You got CVS, the bus
so as
station.
opposed to you're thinking more of a T4 Main Street type of,
I'm thinking from Lucas Avenue out to the traffic, out to the city line should be more T5. T4.
okay,
I don't know, whatever other people's thoughts, T4 to me looks like more of a neighborhood and this is much more commercial.
There's not much there.
You got Ulster Savings Bank, you got-
Residential.
It still allows for large multiplexes, small multiplexes, like work buildings, row houses. It still allows for
I mean,
quite a bit of density. You would say Main Street, more Main Street. I think in some of those, you're not required to have ground floor commercial, where like T5, trying to promote like a
well,
long.
let's just use the old Friendlies. That's the beer distributor. Let's say someone tears it down, they want to put a different commercial building in there. I'm just looking at the T4, I would think that commercial building would be more of a T5 use than a T4 use. When you look from Lucas, Wheatley Avenue to the traffic circle, you have CVS, Ulster Savings Bank, Bank of America, you have a bakery now, we've got TD Bank. Those are all highly commercial activities. You've got the old dentist office, which the vacant land is going to be developed. You have a medical center across the street. You've got a laundromat on the corner. You've got a restaurant, which is Japanese. That whole section all the way out is generally just commercial.
so are you
There's
thinking
some houses.
Yeah, there's about.
more
five.
the T5 Main Street or the T5, I mean, there's, or even a T4 Main Street? Maybe,
Yeah.
Very few uses like with like a T4O that are different from most of the T5 uses.
Yeah, I mean, you can still have general commercial,
Controlled substance sales, and all sorts of,
eating, drinking establishments. Those are all permitted uses.
auto.
Healthcare services. The other thing that changes,
more in, I think, building form. Or are you thinking in terms of use, or are you thinking more in building
I'm
form?
thinking more of use, and those are more commercial, hardcore commercial
Right,
uses.
Yeah, well, this whole thing with this whole transit idea, you're allowing for a lot more uses, not commercial uses, and a lot more
It's
history.
not as
yeah, there's
strict.
definitions in.
So it's.
Correct, but is
You could
T3
get
more
some-
restrictive than or T4 more restrictive than T5?
Well, if you look at, there are certain aspects, there's T4O, which is like almost as permissive as, T5, like any of the T5 districts. There's the, T4MS, then there's T4N, which is more neighborhood oriented, and that's a little less restricted, but you can still get special permits for a lot of these things. And then there's like T3O, which has a lot of permitted uses and
Yeah.
even smaller.
Definitions are-
I mean, I understand what you're saying, I mean, how does the rest of the board feel? I mean, do you think that that area should be looked at and maybe be considered for a more dense development use?
The other thing that changes between the purple and the blue are setbacks and things. So I think generally in that corridor, buildings are set back a little bit from the street. So
The other
it was
thing,
those.
right. And I think you also want to just keep in the back of your heads, that's kind of the gateway to Kingston.
Right.
So you want to, in any, zoning, you want to kind of think about that as well, like coming in, that's your primary, one of your primary gateways.
It's just you have larger parcels for larger commercial developments, because you don't want that uptown where you have your more historic character. But you still have to provide that side of town with
But you
an
can
area to
still,
be developed for businesses.
you can still have all of those things. You can still have commercial businesses, banks, and retail. You can still have all of those uses.
In the T3 zone that it's
In the
designated?
T4.
T4.
Right?
Yeah,
Well, the biggest change, like T4 Main Street to T5 Main Street is 6,000 square foot maximum footprint to 25,000. And what is the square footage of like the CVS?
I know, but now that that's also, how high can you go?
And I'm just looking at
And
here,
the T4, they can only
It
do
says-
3 stories with 4.
primary characteristics of those, I think that's where they make a distinction between those two districts.
I'm just thinking, is that area is limited in height, or is that on that chart?
There is a height difference between those two districts, as well as
3 stories.
the diverse, the T5 has diverse mix of frontages, and the T4 is primarily shop fronts.
And that area was not in that bonus height area, right?
There is a bonus height there, 4 stories, but
Not in the T4,
it's T,
but not in that special height, it's not in that special height overlay. But there is potential
it says
bonus height, yes.
Yeah. up to 3 stories, 4 with bonus. But T5, T4. T4 Main Street, right? Or
yeah, I'm gonna take away the T5 so we can just see the T4s.
Including Curly Ave as well.
I'm sorry, 2.5 with 3, 3.5 with bonus.
So Robert, you're saying from the city line to the intersection of Lucas Avenue?
I just thought that, again, I just thought that and parts of Early Avenue have larger complexes that, let's be honest, right behind Reese's Insurance, there's those old 2-story buildings. Some developer may want to come and knock those down and go up. That's the only place that we have square footage, like the early Ready Care Center, which is what, 3 stories, 4 stories? That in theory, you can do some development without impacting neighborhoods per se. It just seemed a little bit limiting in this T4 versus being in a T5 category.
I would almost call it where Front Street to the city line, because that's the beer distributor, CVS, banks, all that stuff.
So prime,
You
okay,
got the medical center though between Lucas, and you also have Minetti's building, a single story, which could get redeveloped one day and go up.
You know, that could go up to 3 stories. The other one could go up to 6.
That was just a comment.
Okay, so from north.
well,
Let's go.
okay, so it's comment, we're gonna make a note of it, because at the end of the day, when we're
Yeah.
compiling our final thoughts and
I just didn't know,
putting them forward, but if this is something that we wanna look at, we'll spend some time and look at it a
my
little
only
further.
question was, are we limiting the ability to develop that Hurley Avenue and Washington and Schrank Drive corridor to its fullest potential? Because again, those aren't really neighborhoods with homes, so those are areas that you could have some development, office buildings, whatever you want to do in that section if they grow and become bigger as the city becomes bigger in the future.
That's fine. I'd go from Front Street to the city line, T5.
I agree.
I'm sorry, what did you,
Front Street to the city line.
from North Front versus Lucas?
Yeah.
Any other board members want to weigh in?
No, that sounds good, sounds,
I'm with Lucas, because a lot of those houses are starting to get torn down this year.
Okay, so we have Lucas, we have North Front.
You've got one right on the plane right now.
Is there any T4 Main Street
weigh in for
on
me
here,
here.
T4 MS? I didn't see all
Is
that.
that done?
Or
There's something still.
MS.
Not seeing
No, I don't think she's got that
Delaware.
tag. Do you have T4MS ticked on there? I don't-
It's not on the agenda.
No, is that on? Some kind of radar.
Kyla, can you put up T4MS, add that to the selection?
You're thinking Lucas?
Because you got the Meadow Arts building.
It is there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Must not.
Do you wanna
I think
just-
you're zoomed in too
I-
far, maybe.
T4MS is down, maybe the rundown.
Do we need a show of hands for Lucas or what from that?
Oh, right here, it's on Delaware.
We want to consider Lucas to Washington.
So there's just one T4MS in the whole
That's Delaware Avenue.
Delaware Avenue.
Okay.
I mean, maybe that's the appropriate,
Well, that doesn't change the height though, I think that was being
Oh.
talked about, right?
Well, it goes up.
There's no reason
to
why
4
with bonus.
I'd rather see tall buildings over there than the city.
Oh, I'm in favor of Lucas Avenue out to the city lines. That, it's just another block.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Everybody else good with that?
Yeah.
You, what about Hurley Avenue?
Hurley is all T4, I think, a lot of it.
Yeah, but you got a lot of
And
potential.
they, well,
development.
they did a specific study on both Hurley and Albany Avenue. They did focus sessions on both of those with the property owners and stakeholders involved in that discussion. So
Well, there are houses sprinkled through there.
there are, but it's a,
More so than
it
Washington.
was a very mixed, it's a very mixed use. It was O2. It's O2 in the current code. So yeah, the two corridors, Albany and Hurley, were looked at as potential special districts.
That doesn't mean you couldn't comment though, if you feel, it's just that I think the consultants were not sure about those specific locations because they are so different from a lot of other neighborhoods. So that's why they had that extra filter.
I'm just thinking like when you go up Hurley Avenue, you got Bank of America, that office park, basically up to Scott Dutton's building, all the way to Washington Avenue, including the Holiday Inn. Which, let's be honest, Holiday Inn could be redeveloped at some point in time to a higher hotel that's usually 3 or 4 stories, like a, Holiday Inn. If they were to tear it down, it's a 60 building. They're gonna tear it down, they're gonna go up.
Okay.
So just, did you say east of 87?
You know what I mean? I'm just thinking that that's,
No.
They tear old hotels down, they build a new 4-story like they did out in the town of Ulster, like you see Marriott and stuff. Under this T-zone, I don't think you'd be able to do that.
If they could get the bonus height, they could get the 4 stories. But,
But they're
you know, it would make
hotels.
sense. No, I agree with you. I definitely think it would make sense to change that area.
Okay, so I made a comment on that one.
So once this is all been approved, when at the end, is it gonna be rather difficult for folks to request a zoning change? That's good, it's gonna be,
Same procedure as
Unless
there
like-
currently exists. It's the same process.
yeah,
I mean,
I
ultimately,
don't
it's
think
up
that
to the
has changed.
council, but I would think the council would probably not want to change it. Let's see how it unfolds unless there's
Yeah.
a glaring problem from the get-go.
Another comment, one just general comment that I am going to probably present would be that there be a group established that kind of monitors, once this is adopted, in effect that just kind of monitors the, how the process is going, so that in a year, there'll be a report and potentially look at making some changes based on actual implementation.
If applications are flowing through smoothly.
Right. Okay, so,
no change for the section of Albany Avenue here. No change anywhere here. So on this, Luke, Hurley, you're talking about just one side, or are you talking about both
I'm
sides?
talking from the Freeman Building back to Holly Inn to Washington Avenue.
and then,
Probably on
and
the
then Washington
on one side,
Avenue
on
from,
I'd say on the left, and you probably should include Ulster Savings Bank and Dutch Village. There's no reason that those buildings can't go up, and really, you also have the question of Schwank Drive. You've got the old Spectrum building, Rondout Savings Bank's gonna be selling their building, you've got the,
There's a lot of parking that's not being used, it could be.
Well, those sections are in,
what are they in?
I believe they are in T5. Yeah.
Yeah, so good, so that would all complement each other.
Okay, and
What is it, T5, it ends right on Schwank.
which one? T5N and T5 Main Street.
Yeah, I think that,
Okay. All right, so we'll look at that as a mapping change. Okay, let's move on to the T3s. So there's a T3NO.
I'm just,
Yeah,
no, just before, I think we're gonna have a lot of discussion on 3 and T3s. Should we do waterfront, and we've got all this, mostly everything.
okay,
I'm just,
Yeah, that's fine.
if that goes long, at least we've covered a lot of ground.
okay, so want to look at the special district waterfront?
Can I get a few, as much as we can off the list?
No,
Before we.
so we've done conservation, kind of, we'd like to just touch
So
back.
Kyle, the waterfront is, that has everything we see SD,
no, just the SD that's about, these are all special districts, so,
nothing, to the west of 9W?
correct.
And
What about the concern of flooding in that area? Further development there.
There definitely is.
well, that's, 3 weeks ago, it was underwater.
Exactly,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
why it's
they're in
trickier.
flood zones. There are specific requirements for construction
So flood
in
proofing and.
flood zones.
Or sometimes they elevate the parking underneath.
Right.
Flows in, flows out.
This is the flow.
I know.
So the special district, the waterfront, there's actually a special districts map, Kyla, that doesn't have the colors on it, the one that's in the,
Yeah, I think I have to go back to
because it's got the, you want to look for the one with the dark red color.
Let me open this again. And, 2 seconds.
Is this all this gray, the waterfront?
No. There's special districts, there's public park, special district, commercial, special district, multifamily, institutional.
Is yours?
SDW when you.
I think the waterfront overlay too.
What's this one? BW is what?
Right there, that's, you got it. You can't pull up the whole map?
I can't do on the,
Well, that one's just the gray one, is that every color?
yeah, so for
Yeah.
Gridix, like, I don't think I can make that
Oh.
a separate color,
Okay,
so. This is-
because yeah, it's confusing with the other special districts. So the waterfront is that dark red color, and it's all from the Rondout Creek on the Strand. And then
Oh, so
further
far-
down
I was wrong.
along the Rondout Creek, when you get by Island Dock and beyond, there's a component of it as well.
What is Island Dock?
Island Dock is the,
No, I mean, it's not shaded district.
what district is that? Island Dock is a T2.
Conservation.
Yep, conservation. So the waterfront mixed use development is in those two areas along the Rondout Creek, on the water side only of the closest public right-of-way to the water. That was a discussion that we did have, whether it should be brought across the street, the special district or not, but it was kept on the water side because of public access to waterfront, things of that nature. And view sheds, things like that were talked about. Any questions on the waterfront districts?
What's the current max height for buildings on that area?
The current zoning is RFR, Rondout waterfront.
Yeah, but what's the max
There,
height?
when the city went through the process of developing their local waterfront revitalization program back in the early 90s, we looked at the water frontage we had along both the Rondout Creek and the Hudson River. So when we adopted the LWRP, we adopted also two new zoning districts. One to address the Hudson River frontage and the other to address the Rondout frontage. And the characteristics of each obviously were brought into those two separate zones. Those zones will no longer be, they're being taken away.
I'm looking at it from, I spent a ton of money to have a view of the waterfront, and then now potentially someone could build a 4-story building that completely blocks my view. So that's why I was just curious what the zoning is now, because I mean, like, if I bought this house with the understanding that, hey, a 4-story building could potentially go up, and now all of a sudden, 2, 3, a decade later, now I have this in front of me.
Maximum height in the current RFR, it's a little quirky because there's setbacks from the water and from the street. So a lot of parcels along the Rondout Creek are really left undevelopable per se because they're so narrow when you get further upstream. When you're out more towards where it gets closer to the Hudson, they're a little wider.
But this is under the current code you're saying?
Yeah, under the current, that's what he's asking, what the current, right?
Yeah, so like currently,
Wise, so you
how
know,
high can a building be right now?
So,
Let's
I
take-
wanna
let's take Millen.
It's
Yeah.
based on setback, like within the first 15 feet, there's like, I think, nothing, then you've got, after that, I think it's 10, and then it goes back to 20 feet from the water. It goes up to two stories maybe.
Yeah, 2.5. I'm in the
Yeah.
lot bulk schedule. It's 35 feet and 2.5 stories.
So the max currently right now is 2.5 stories,
Correct.
And we're proposing
potential up to 4.
for the guy that's on the opposite side of the creek from Beale Street heading up those hills. It's looking like the creek, he's kind of overlooking everything. You could have a building that could come up in front.
Well, special district waterfront,
Do these,
principal building height, 2.5 max, stories, 3 max, special height overlay 4. But there are
people put,
a bonus height, so I think this is why I think you can go higher, because there's a 2-story bonus height thing there, and I think you can, I think that's in addition to the max.
now if you build a property on stilts to get you out of the flood zone, is that stilts considered a story? Like some commercial buildings do parking.
I know we talked about
piers.
that, I'd have to look into that to get you, before I answer, I think
That's potentially
it
5.
is not. There would be parking underneath, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, like, let's say, let's say somebody decides to build a building, but they know it floods, they can put parking underneath with piers for the first story. So really, your first floor is the second story, so potentially, are you still doing a story including the parking? Or are you saying, well, 4-story plus the story that the parking's on, you can end up having a 5-story building?
Yeah, so the definition said cellars and underground parking structures are not considered
Yeah.
stories for the purpose of determining building height. One level of habitable attic may be permitted as a half-story.
And is that the same in all these districts where we say you could go up to 6 or 8 stories? If they decide to put parking underneath, they can get another story?
The language.
Well, that's
is
underground parking.
True, cellars and underground parking, true.
That would be
So
below
it's,
the subsurface, below grade, yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I mean, like, let's be
I know
honest,
what you're
a lot of the parcels, and I'm just gonna use Ian Sheehan, just throw it out there, he's got a lot of parcels along the creek. We know it floods, but we also know that there's a lot of areas along the waterfront, along the east coast that floods. Can you do some type of residential where you put a house on stilts? Like they do in New Jersey, like they do along the shore, like they do in Long Island? So that the floods come in, the floods go out, but you still have a house with a view.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the ways to construct in floodways, is that they are built so that the flood waters can flow through. That's one of the construction methods.
So in this special district, is this, can you do residences? Water district?
Yes.
Okay. Which right now it's commercial, I don't think you can.
No, you can. You can do non-water dependent uses when you provide public access to and along the water, like with restaurants. Anything that's not water, right now, anything not water dependent, you have to provide that public access. That public access is still a requirement in this code.
Yeah, so SDWMU is home occupation dwelling unit and accessory dwelling unit. So theoretically, yes, someone could buy it, put a house on stilts, make it a 5-story, and then anyone on the other side of the road, there goes your waterfront view.
Theory, they aren't really main parcels to have it.
Sure.
historically, there were buildings all along
Along
Street.
both sides of Beale Street.
Mhm.
And you have the school there high and dry. I just see some of those parcels eventually becoming more residential, which flows out front than like Sorby's Creek versus commercial.
That waterfront development standards. So I will get an answer to the first floor when it's calculated. I, for some reason, don't know, but I will double check that. Okay? Any other questions about the waterfront? We'll get into actually the waterfront standards probably next time. It's in section 4. Anybody? Okay, do we want to move to T3? Did we cover T2s and T1s, the natural conservation ones? I know we talked about that at the beginning.
The only question we had was as a by city, which I think you.
Right. Yep.
And the concern of building a T2 in a floodplain area.
And not having any building plans.
My comments, you're just talking about, are you talking about any district in the floodplain, or are you talking about specifically the T districts? I mean, your comment, you
For
probably.
conservation,
Okay.
In the T2
Yeah.
areas.
With T2, so what happens if there is someone talking about building a big development on something that we're talking about making T2? Like that, the Meadows is on what we're showing as T2.
So are you asking like what would happen to their approval?
Yeah.
Their approval would remain
Uh,
in place. Yeah. Unless they, there's a whole section in the administrative portion that deals with the transition, going from one code to the next. And there's one scenario is if you're in the approval process. One scenario is if you're done with the approval process, but you've yet to construct. And one is if you're fully constructed already, but you don't meet, then you become non-conforming. So there's a whole series of different levels in that administrative section. Okay, so let's go to the T3s. We've got T3 neighborhood, T3 large lot, these are your areas. That Kyla has up on the map. So the lighter color up on the map is a T3 neighborhood. That lighter pink. The green, there's a T3 large lot. It's kind of hard to.
Do you want me to take some away? Do you want me to take something away, or do you want me to?
Why don't we just go with T3 large lot? Just do one at a time.
Okay. So those are your T3 large lot parcels throughout Kingston. A lot up in the 9W area, along Flatbush, those are pretty much your cemeteries. You've got same type of thing on, looks like
No,
West O'Reilly.
your T3 is up on the right of 9W is First, Second, Third Avenue area.
Yeah, around 9W, there's quite a few.
And you have basically Upper Pearl, Emerson, Main, Village Lane, that area. Brand new.
And these things can change if there's lot line revisions or subdivisions, right? These particular zones? If they change their lot sizes, is that?
No, I don't think it would change this, I mean, you wouldn't change the zoning district if they did a subdivision. I think they would be governed. If they're in a large, T3 large lot, it would just be like your current zoning code prescribes what your lot size, minimum lot sizes would be.
So if you wanted to do a subdivision, you still would have that from 1 lot to 2 lots. Those 2 lots would still have to meet the general size requirements for that zone that you're in.
Okay.
So potentially, you may not be able to do the subdivision because you're not going to meet the large lot requirements.
So so you can see in the lot width section, you need a 50-foot minimum, but there's no maximum width. In the other T3 neighborhoods, there's a max of 100. So you actually could not combine lots in those other districts to make a lot larger than 100 feet wide. In large lots, you could combine, so if you owned, some smaller lots next to each other and wanted to combine them, there's no restriction on that.
It's just
In
when
the
you
other
break
districts.
larger ones up to make small ones, then you
You'd have
can't.
to have at least 50-foot width and 100-foot depth.
For the
There'd be
T3,
T3L,
Or would that just change it from
55.
T3L to a T3 NRL? Is that what you're asking?
But then you
Theoretically.
can't do that without a variance, right? Does that trigger a variance request or?
yeah, you could, if you wanted to be in a different zoning district, you could.
I don't know if you can ask for a waiver on that, but I mean, with the lot standards in the T3L, you've got the 50-foot minimum. There's no max. Lot
So you have
depth is 100-foot
so you have
minimum,
100
so
foot.
50 by 100.
if 100-foot lot, you can make 275 lots. But if you only have a 100-foot lot, you can't subdivide because you're not going to meet the requirement.
So if Mrs. Andretta, who's got acres of property right here, wants to divide up her, she's governed by the 100-foot.
50 by 100.
50 minimum.
Yes,
Each lot would have to meet that requirement.
At least 50 by 100.
I mean, current zoning has that same kind of,
Oh, I know.
The only thing different,
which is a question under our subdivision regs are not changing. So the subdivision regs do give the planning board the ability to work with some of those dimensions, provided the intent of the code is met. So that would stay in effect.
So something that is different about this code from our current is the max lot size requirements. Right now, we have only minimum lot size.
There's no max on these.
There's no max on this particular one.
On three, yeah.
In the other districts that we talked about,
There are
there
maximums.
are maximums.
But now you have in this zone, Wayne, larger properties that are in single family R neighborhoods. Which now you're gonna be able to put duplexes, you can put multiple houses on one parcel. You can put, multiple cottages, create a cottage court.
Like a pocket neighborhood, right?
So that's. That's the biggest question that I've had from residents on this, is that many people bought our neighborhoods that are single family zoning. And now you're taking that away. Which affects the, the overall neighborhood character. I don't think, I understand there's no design standards, right?
It has,
No.
what I was told, the design standard said it has to meet the exterior of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So,
there-
like, for
there's-
example,
There's
we-
a whole section on streetscape architectural design.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
let's say you take this particular neighborhood and you have somebody has a two-car garage that's attached to the house. Can they get rid of the garage doors and put an apartment in it? Or is that not with the design standards of the neighborhood?
Typically,
They
the garage
could.
would match the house, though.
They could, but right,
But you just take two garage doors out and put a door.
Yeah, so my understanding of all this is, yeah, absolutely.
So that's gonna affect overall the character of the neighborhood design.
But we need more housing, so how are you gonna do it?
We need more housing, but you have
You
people
have these
that,
large lots that,
but the people that have these large lots pay a lot of money for these large lots and they don't want housing. in their
That's how
neighborhood.
people in the south got that. Sorry.
I'm just saying, I mean, people pay $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 in these neighborhoods for large pieces of land that are in single family neighborhoods. That's why they bought there. If they wanted to live in a live-work neighborhood, they would have chose that. Just like the people that lived in a live-work neighborhood that come before the board, they complain about parking. But again, you bought a house without a driveway, and you have different sections of the city.
From the council perspective, that is the exact same thing that I've been hearing nonstop. I chose this particular neighborhood because I'm close to the city, but I don't have 500 people right around me. I want them to be close, but not right in the middle of everything. And with this, we're essentially saying, I understand you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, but because there's a potential for a housing crisis, there isn't. Oh, well, I'm sorry you spent that money, but now, like I said, the example that I live, my neighbors, they're on the fence of getting rid of their house. Some developer could come in, level it, build a sixplex, and, I won't even touch the parking, but,
Well, the parking's an issue too. I mean, I live in a neighborhood and, obviously people that come to my house, they park in the city street because my wife and I have a car in the driveway. But if you start infilling the neighborhood with more housing and you double the amount of parking, that's, again, not what people signed up for.
And the other largest thing I've heard is in our infrastructure. We're almost at capacity as it is now. Now we're taking, like I said, using my wife and I, it's two of us. Our next door neighbors, it's two of them. The house, two houses down, it's two of them. Now potentially instead of 2, 4, 6, we have, 36 people on that same water line, sewer line, all these things,
Paying for it. Sorry,
Huh?
okay, paying for that sewer line. You have more people on the block paying for the sewer line. It supports the infrastructure that's there, the denser it is.
But who's gonna go and replace those pipes to handle the influx of now
The
36
city
people?
will with the taxes that revenue, it increases the tax revenue, which pays for it. But I'm not supposed to be talking,
They
sorry.
did that in
We
Clifton
need to
Avenue,
keep
they were
planning.
the Narco building,
Okay,
because they were gonna channel it down Clifton Avenue, but now they moved it down Flatbush. So they did put infrastructure in, they replace the pipes and stuff.
For the big house.
Up to my house.
Yeah.
The large developers are doing that, but the local, residents are gonna be required to do that. I mean, we got sewer lines in Manor Avenue that collapse every other year, once a
Yeah,
year.
they're 100 years old, bro.
Yeah, and they're running lines through trying to.
Well, what I would say is that as we would typically do with, site development plans, when we have, multifamilies come before us, we do reach out to the engineer, we do reach out to the water department, we do reach out to the DPW.
Well, you're not gonna
We
have that. in
we
zones.
ask,
You're talking about the T3 and the T4 zone. You're not gonna have any of that. Add an apartment here, add an apartment there, add an apartment here. You're adding them all over the city. Next thing you know, in 20 years, you double your capacity. All of which has not been gone through any developers, has not gone through any site plan, because it's all been a permitted right.
Well,
I don't necessarily think that just because it's permitted, they can go and they can pull a building permit tomorrow.
My
Plus-
understanding is that if I want to put an apartment in a house, in like in a basement, as long as I meet building code and it's permitted by right, I don't have to go before any boards.
I don't,
Am I correct?
Well, for an accessory apartment, in most circumstances, you would not have to
No.
get a site plan.
So that's our point. We're talking about the T3 and T4 zone. That's what we're discussing.
I would say with regard to sewer and infrastructure, we will be also reviewing the DGEIS, the environmental impact statement, which I think would speak to the utilities specifically, because during that review, they should be looking at things like utilities.
Yeah, but it's, again, you guys are definitely the experts in this, but is there a way to get that, using my area, for example, someone wants to build that sixplex next to me, we do some sort of survey and say, no, the existing infrastructure we have right now cannot handle this.
Well, that's all part of the secret process.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the size, it would trigger certain things from
But again,
developers may have to
we're
add.
talking about residential neighborhoods. This discussion is basically our single-family housing stock throughout the city when we look at a T.
1, 2, and 3s would not come
Correct.
for, well, they don't now.
No, but I mean, look.
I
we
understand,
had
but
it-
I get what you're
we
saying,
had
because
an
right
issue.
now, it wouldn't be something that would be allowed by right. I understand what you're
So
saying.
we had an issue back in, there's people that have been in the city forever, in the 60s and 70s. We had a tremendous amount of single families that were basically getting cut up and put into 2 and 3 and 4 families. And then we had issues with that because we were stacking neighborhoods on, a lot of residences on top of each other. I mean, since then, we've had, laws in place that have protected tenants more, but you're doubling neighborhoods' capacities. I mean, I was looking on here, there's one of the zones, I think it was a T3 zone, said if you did an accessory dwelling, I think you could be within 5 feet of your neighbor's property line. Well, a lot of these people who live in these neighborhoods, none of the houses are on top of each other. But now you're allowing much more square footage of a lot to be used. So if somebody's, now has a house that's so far away from everyone coming back on top, that's not, in my opinion, the general character of these neighborhoods. And that's what I'm hearing from residents that are concerned. Because we've basically said that the minimum density is what, a 3 unit?
Isn't the people that are complaining about that own the land, that want to do accessory housing, whatever it is they want to do?
People like you and your
Aren't
neighbor.
they complaining? Why would they be complaining? Because they're gonna make money.
No, it's the people like you. You, your neighbor next door, you're in a single family neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, your neighbor next door decides to put a 2 or 3 unit in. So now you got 3 units, no parking requirements, and half the tenants are parking in front of your house. So now when you have your invited guests to come over, they're now parking down the street. Did you buy in a multifamily neighborhood?
There is multifamilies on the street.
And are they next door to you though? Did you buy a home next to a multifamily?
I'm set back, I'm 200 feet off the street, so somewhere around there.
I'm not saying what's right or wrong, I'm just saying that this is what I'm
But I
hearing.
do have another property that was subdivided, and there's two houses on that right of way. And they started parking on the street, so it's becoming a little congested getting into mailboxes and stuff. Because they have no place to park, and I didn't want to park it on. Because I own part of the right of way. Actually, I pay taxes on the right of
No,
way.
you're just changing, based on the zoning, in the next 20 years, you're changing the density of neighborhoods. Well, does it though?
How are we going to house the people that want to live here, who work here? How is that gonna happen?
I understand that they want to live here, but the question is, why do I have to sacrifice when I bought a house to provide housing for somebody else that wants to live in Kingston? That's the question that homeowners, I'm gonna be the bad guy here, I'm just asking a question, I mean, I'm a real estate attorney, I see people that buy homes all the time, first question, who owns this, who's next door, what can they do with this property, what can be built here? That's what people are asking before they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on houses. Somebody comes into these neighborhoods, I mean, in my neighborhood, somebody bought a house for $600,000, it's sitting empty because they're waiting for this probably to go through so it can be an accessory dwelling unit. This is the question.
It's a cultural shift, and it has to happen.
It doesn't have to happen. It's a question of what the residents of the city want to have happen. And whether you want it throughout the entire city, or you want it in more live-work neighborhoods.
But I don't think we can be selective about, where. If you make it a standard, it has to be across the whole city, it can't just be.
Well, no, you have different zones.
Oh, well.
So the question is, do we go with the entire city being a three-unit zone? Or do we take some zones and bump it down to 2 or single family? I mean, you have a lot of the city right now that's single family zoning, it's been like that since when? 70s, 80s?
No, 60s.
60s. So you have people that have been living in these neighborhoods since the 60s that are in single family neighborhoods because they want to be in single family neighborhoods.
So
And that's the exact same thing I'm hearing.
is your concern with more density parking specific, or the look of the neighborhoods, or just
It's
total?
a combination of everything. I mean, if you have a single family neighborhood that has more open space and less street congestion, because I mean, let's be honest, I mean, my neighborhood, there aren't even sidewalks in the neighborhood, kids play in the street, ride their bikes in the street. It's not there are no sidewalks. And we have a city park that they have to ride their bike down the street to get to. So you start adding density, adding traffic, adding parked cars. Granted, this isn't gonna happen overnight, but in the next 20, 25 years, it's gonna happen. How is that gonna affect the neighborhoods? Are people gonna stay? Are people gonna go?
People bought their houses in specific areas for specific reasons. Like, again, using myself as an example, we bought our house because it was in a quieter section. There wasn't, apartment buildings all around us. It was just a quiet neighborhood. Same thing, we don't have sidewalks, kids. I'm right next to Hutton Park. People would, ride their bikes, walk. It's a very popular road that I would live on for walking. And then now we're taking that and we're just urbanizing it for, it's basically, we're saying to existing homeowners, hey, I understood you bought this piece of property for this specific reason, but, now the city has other intentions, so, oh well, don't like it, move.
You got Mark Rogers right on the corner. It's got 3 units or 4 units.
But we moved in there knowing that. That's the thing, like, if we moved
I
into
have
a
a
particular
two-family across the
area.
street from me. I knew that when I bought my house. But I also have a single family next to me that's,
My battery.
a good distance between my pool and my house. I know
Do
the
you want
neighbor,
to?
single mom, but do I want to turn it into a 2 or 3 unit? No. Do I want them right up on my property line? No. But this is what I'm hearing from people.
Is there,
Mine's fully
I
charged.
think it's a 25-foot requirement.
We just,
If you build,
it's all changing.
there was a limit. If you build, no,
No. And then also the overall aesthetics of the neighborhood. You go down the street and, where are you gonna park? If you're taking garages, converting them, are you taking basements, converting them, what the entrance, what's the look gonna be?
What's wrong with it looking like a denser neighborhood, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. If that's what, if you want to live in a denser neighborhood, then you choose a denser neighborhood.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
No.
Well, I would say with the look of the building, that there are very specific standards for the look of the structure. Which talks about like what, even down to what types of front porches you can have in each, you know, in each specific zone. Whether you're allowed to stoop, whether you're allowed to porch. So I think we will probably look at,
But let's say somebody has a wraparound porch in front of their house, single families. Developer comes in, decides I'm gonna turn it into two family. Can they now enclose that front porch, close the garage, put a unit on the first floor and put a unit on the second floor?
I don't know the answer to that specifically.
I'm just saying that that's how neighborhoods and the overall site appearance and visual of the neighbors can possibly change. You're also, I think some of the parking and the driveway, because you're, like, to talk about bulk requirements, I think some of that is getting enhanced. So we got more paved surfaces to allow these uses. Me personally, I don't want my neighbor next door paving their backyard to create parking. Got a house on Albany Avenue a couple months ago, they paved the entire front yard, it's all paved, from the front door to the curb.
Yes, and there are restrictions on that, but I don't know, you know, maybe we want to talk to Bartek about having more detail on this.
But they didn't use Jones and Hawk to face off the curb.
Nelson Avenue.
It'd be good to look at examples of cities where Columbia's code has been adopted and to see, you know, what changes has happened there so that people who are scared of changes can see what's happening in other.
Could also be interesting if the cities that have been form-based coding, if they've done away entirely with their single-family zones. I don't know the answer.
And the other examples we're giving have to be relevant.
Buffalo still has single-family neighborhoods.
believe so.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo's not a good comparison to Kingston and I forgot what.
Buffalo's a giant city.
Yeah, and there was something else we talked about that we took it from New Orleans.
Yeah,
I mean, that was specifically for Mardi Gras. I mean, well, let's not
right.
joke around and say it was for something else. It was, okay, let's capitalize on the amount of money we can make during Mardi Gras. So, but it's, you know, we're picking and choosing to make something that's not
I
Kingston.
don't know, I mean, again, I don't know of any municipalities that did away entirely with their single-family zoning. I don't know of any. I don't know the city of Albany, I don't know the city of Colony, I don't know the Syracuse, and many of these cities have single-family neighborhoods. They are what they are.
Any other board members want to give any thought on that? Wayne, do you have any thoughts?
I think also we might have a map created, which I'll have to check on that, of these districts and what uses are actually in place now, because a lot of your single-family neighborhoods aren't really all single-family. There's, a lot of them have multiplexes in them, duplexes, accessory apartments, so it might be good to look at that.
The entire state of California.
You mean that were used in
That are
prior
currently,
discussions, yeah,
yeah.
okay. All right, so we'll check with Bartek on that.
Do away with it, then they can create communities and bonus restrictions in the HOA that prevent it.
I mean, I don't know, where I live,
probably looks like a bunch of single family houses, but I'm kind of surrounded by houses that all have apartments in them and are multifamily. I don't have a problem with it, but it was there when I bought, so I guess it's not super relevant to what we're talking about, new development.
I'd be interested to see how, like, how it lays out, how, like, what,
What it is currently.
yeah, what it is currently, just to see, you know, how many nuggets there are throughout the city of large blocks of single families.
You look at the old zoning code map, and you'll see triple R, double R, single R.
Yeah.
Right,
Huge,
but in
huge green
reality-
swaths.
I think what Kyle was saying though is that there's a map that was generated
I
early
think,
on in this process, maybe that had what the actual uses of the parcels were.
because even though they're single family districts, most of them have multifamily uses, you just might not know, you know.
I'm
maybe
aware
not
of which
your-
neighborhoods are, which
your
neighborhoods aren't.
right, But,
I can name them.
but this is just an example too of the frontage type section that we're talking about. And so here you would be allowed like a stoop or a front porch. It's very specific on how the front would look.
I know on my street, all the houses that are sold in the last 3-4 years, the people have bought there because it's larger lots, not on top of each other, having space. That's why they came there. And I can see everyone being included, not enjoying it, get something 5 feet off. Because that's the reason we bought.
Oh, I mean, my neighborhood too is primarily also. And but we're, you know, close proximity to grade school, whatever. You know, we bought there because my kids all walked to the grade school. They all walked to the high school.
Our kids do the same.
You know, that's why we bought there. They all play in the street. We're on a corner lot. We have a large size lot. We're on the corner.
When you look at, I'm in Roseville Park, from Manor Avenue, along Olney Avenue, all the way to Chambers, until you hit really the senior citizen complex in Chambers, all single family. I mean, majority is all single family. Lincoln Park, Roosevelt Park, Harbor Street, Town of Ulster. I mean, granted, you're talking about another municipality, but that whole swath.
Oh, I mean, I can think of 2 duplexes within walking distance.
Would you
That are
ever
in my
purchase your house?
neighborhood.
Would you purchase, I mean, I'm.
Oh, I purchased them knowing they were duplexes. I mean, I purchased knowing that these were
Everywhere,
duplexes.
if all of those, like, if they were apartment buildings.
Oh, no, probably not, no. I mean, we purchased because it was a quiet street, it was a corner lot, we were close to the grade school. You know, it was an ideal location, we purchased purposefully
And presuming, and again, not
for
asking,
that location.
not asking specifics, but presumably the price you paid for a house had all of those factors incorporated.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and we bought, you know, 16 years ago, we bought our house 16 years ago. You know, we've been there for a long time. And, you know, we know the neighborhood, we know, you know, it's a quiet one, you know, we live on the corner of Mary's and Elizabeth, it's a, you know, one street is a one-way, you know, for a long time, you know, Washington was shut down, there was no traffic coming through up there, it was quiet for a long time. But you know, Stewart's was right there, the pizza place was on the corner, it was, you know, it was a great it's been a great neighborhood for 16 years. But yeah, I mean, we bought there because it's quiet, my kids play in the road, our pool's in the backyard, it's, you know, there's.
Okay, so bringing this back around, are we then looking to try and take areas of the map and make them less dense zoning?
What would
Or
be easier
is
to
that
do
what
that
you're
or just
looking?
change the restrictions
Or
of what
you're taking the T3 and reducing the,
I don't know, I mean, I think you gotta look at general area and decide whether it's set, I mean, T3 is, just, I don't know. Another zone within T3,
No, yeah, right now you've got the T3 NO, T3N, and T3L, large lot. So you've got T3 large lot, T3 neighborhood, and T3 neighborhood open.
So talk about 5 foot from. People were mentioning 5 feet from the neighbor's house.
yeah, if you look at some of your sidelines and then said with exact accessory. ADUs. I don't know, I'm just looking at the T3 neighborhood, and they have small multiplex, corner stores, cottage cores, duplexes. I think you have some single family neighborhoods that I don't think people want this type of use. There's some neighborhoods in the city of Kingston that were created in the 80s and 90s that have deed restrictions, that don't even allow these uses.
And that's a good question now. If existing parcels have deed restrictions already in place on them, those deed restrictions would supersede the zoning, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're one of the few municipalities that don't require a title search as part of the planning board process. Because if you had a title search, these deeds and covenants will come up. That's how you got caught on quick check.
Right, no, I know.
So what are our options? Either ask to have T3 zones reworked or, look at seeing if we can change the.
You could look at adding another T3 transect. You could look at, like you said, reworking one of the T3 current transects. Look at the zoning map and, or the regulating plan, I should say. And
I mean, I'm just looking at small multiplex in T3 neighborhood. I don't know of any lots in my neighborhood that could even support a small multiplex, just not big lots. They're 50 feet wide.
But then you're going up, that's the thing.
How high can you go? Stories?
Yeah, I mean, there's still maximum building height of 2.5 stories.
2 minutes? That's what
Yeah,
it's
and
for.
and there are still lot coverage maximums. So it's not like you could cover your entire lot with a
Do
structure,
you know what roughly some of those
lot coverage.
like percentage? How much?
well, your
It says 50% lot
lot
coverage maximum.
coverage in the T3L is 30% max.
So if you look at page 3.4, it says lot coverage percentage max on T3NO and T3N is 50%.
I think my greatest concern is the existing housing stock getting converted.
Your main building can be 2.5 stories and your accessory building can be 2.5 stories. So you can put 2 buildings covering 50% of your lot, and they can both be 2.5 stories.
But no parking requirement.
No parking requirement.
I'm just concerned about the old.
And it can be a bed and
existing-
breakfast now.
Existing housing
You can
getting
run it as a
converted.
bed and breakfast.
What they done?
And your accessory building can be a bodega.
What did you say, Robert, your main concern?
My main concern is taking the existing
Structures
structures and converting them poorly. And you have some neighborhoods that just don't want to convert it. Three neighbors come up to me about it. Yes, we can have. What's going on?
So it seems like this concerns only in the T3 neighborhoods, right?
Yeah, which were traditionally your R, triple R,
Right.
double R, if I remember correctly. Which had very limited uses under the current code. What's your neighborhood? On the current zoning? Triple R up there?
I'll defer to you.
Triple R?
It's either triple or double up in that area, but there's both.
So I don't think you need to make a decision at this moment, what our,
I
what
think
your
what we're gonna
recommendation
do
would be.
is probably try and put together the notes.
Mhm.
Those will get circulated around to everybody. You can make comment on those notes, if they're correct. And then, I mean, obviously, this discussion is gonna continue into our next meeting.
And to your comment, it would be interesting to know what cities or municipalities, have they done away with single family zoning altogether? Or are some of these cities still maintaining that within their code?
Well, I think the comparable cities,
Correct.
right?
I just found the city of Malta adopted a form-based code. I don't know what that, Malta, New York,
Malta,
has a form-based code. So,
Like Saratoga. It is borough. Saratoga County, I think.
yeah, it's usually.
And, just looking at this and just to use another example, First, Second, and Third Avenue. If you're looking in that area, kind of going into it, that a lot of those single-family homes were converted to something else. So in that area, I could kind of see it, but again,
First,
Clifton Avenue.
First, Second, Third Avenue, there's a lot of older brick homes that had like a small apartment downstairs.
Yes.
Because you had families that had usually a senior member of the family that came in, so they had like a, like a basement apartment and the family's upstairs, or, mom and dad or something like that. But again, when you're purchasing in a neighborhood similar to that characteristic, that's something that you expect. I mean, most people that look at property and go out with a realtor and try and say, I want to live in Kingston, they live in different neighborhoods because there's certain things they want. They either want restaurants, they want single family, they want more space, they want to be walkable, they want to be live work. And they basically zero in on a particular neighborhood. I mean, that's why we call them neighborhoods. Each one is different character, so they can pick and choose what works best for them and their family.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was like, First, Second, and Third Avenue would make sense as a T3. Because, that is the quote unquote neighborhood there.
There's one in Albany.
Where we're talking, the areas you and I are specifically talking about, they don't make sense. And I think that's where we need
If
to.
you go up Grandview, Lounsbury, Millwoods Lane, Mountain View, they're all single family houses. Clifford Park.
Abbey Street, maybe you go towards the end of Abbey Street, there are a couple, but again, you come in knowing that.
So for the next, are you ready to, do you want to talk about administrative? Do you want to move on?
Yeah, I mean, we still have the administrative section to go through.
Do you want to do that now? What's everyone's feel here? You want to keep going?
I am limited, but let's see, I don't think this will be as bad as.
It's 8:30.
Because I think our next meeting will have some of those details about the building design and parking and those kinds of things that maybe will alleviate some concerns. Or might not, but.
Did everybody have a chance to review the administrative sections of the code?
Yeah.
I spent more time on the other code section.
I spent more time on the administrative section.
I'm sure you did. What's my workload?
What does everybody feel? Anyone start diving into the administrative section?
This I'm really deferring to you. This is.
I spent more time on the other.
Yeah, I skimmed it too. I mean, this really talks about the other board that you're gonna be part of. so that,
Right,
Minor site
but there are,
There's other parts in there.
obviously, we have to comment on the entire document, so, there are questions in there that I've, identified that I can, talk to Bartek separately about first. I think, I've already mentioned the staffing question. In the code, I can quickly kind of run through what my comments are. It says in here that any permit, license, or certificate issued in conflict with the provisions of this chapter, whether intentionally or unintentionally, shall be null and void. So my question would be, how are consequences addressed if significant improvements already have been made to the property? So say the building department issued a permit in error, which has been done.
Right.
And the homeowner goes ahead and makes all these improvements and obviously that was something that didn't go through the correct review process, or the channels wouldn't be something that would be an allowed use or whatever. How is that dealt with? I mean, it's nice to say that, but is it,
Many people are relying on the
Realistic.
building department, they submit an application, they expect. it to be
I
reviewed.
understand that, so
That's the
that's
stamp
right,
of approval.
right, but it says shall be null and void. So how, I mean, logically, realistically, is that something, that can
Where they
stand up?
then go back and go through the variance process, which we have people do.
I was
It's,
looking at the major and minor waivers. What are they gonna be?
well, I mean, there's no one definition, they're at all different all different places. I mean, there are waivers to various sections of the code. Some are listed as minor, some are major, some go to the minor review board, some go to the planning board. I mean, they're all over the place. There's no way to really define what they are.
But are these issues that are gonna be taken care of before they get to our board?
No, they're requesting waivers, like you would request variances. Right now, there's ways to request waivers.
Like a parking waiver we currently do.
Right.
There'll be just another,
Very similar. It talks about an appeal in this section here, appeal the, if, an aggrieved party may appeal a decision made in accordance with this article, which is the administrative section, within 30 days of filing the decision in the office of the city clerk. What does the city clerk do with the appeal? They make the decision?
No. The decision is filed with the city clerk. They have 30 days to appeal that decision.
It says,
What's
it's
that?
Article,
Article 8, Section 5.
an aggrieved party may appeal a decision made in accordance with this article within 30 days of the filing of the decision in the office of the city clerk. So what you're saying is they have to file
So they have 30
appeal within
days.
30 days?
Yeah, from the
Okay,
day
I
the
got
clock
it.
starts when it's
Okay,
filed
all right.
in the office of
Okay.
the city.
Okay, I got it. In site development approval under the 1C, it says a majority of the minor site plan review board may vote to change the planning administrator's designation of a project as a minor site plan. I think it should be two major site.
Yeah, to a major site.
Not or.
What section?
On page 8.1, number 1C.
Because the minor site plan review board will be voting on the major site plan.
So if it goes, if I make the determination that it's a minor site plan,
Your board will.
goes to the minor review board, they can override that with a majority and say it's a major site plan. But it says, or it should be two. That's it.
Oh, it's just a typo.
Right.
And he said, because I asked a question, he said there's an appeal process, right?
Yeah.
to your board?
Article 78,
No, prior to that, I believe if
it
something,
goes to,
if they don't get, yeah,
They don't like your
then it
opinion,
can go to the.
then they can hit our board.
yes,
And then our board would vote either to concur with your committee or to vote otherwise.
In the flow chart, I think it would be helpful to insert timeframes, and any constraints in that flow chart. Because there are timeframes associated with decision making that need to be complied with. I had questions just surrounding the administration of the minor site plan review board. You know, how frequently should they be meeting? Presuming their meetings have to be published, like public meeting, under the open meetings law. That's a lot of administrative stuff that's gonna add. It's not like I can call a meeting, if I get an application, determine it to be a minor site plan review at my level, I can't call that board meeting within 2 days. There's process.
You're gonna be
and
monitoring
procedure.
two boards.
Huh?
You're gonna be monitoring two boards, the minor site plan and the major.
She's not even monitoring it, she's running it.
We're running them.
So,
Is the minor site plan review board gonna fall under the open meetings law and all that stuff?
I would think so.
It's still subject to.
They're making decisions, right?
They are making decisions that.
So what are you doing? You doing this during the day, or are you doing this at meetings at night? Public intent.
Well, the whole point, yeah.
That's
mean,
a good question. I mean, I think it's, because it's
Always
staff, they would more
Maybe you'll run
likely
it.
be done during a work day
Hold on.
time period, but yeah, if they are open to the public, could present an issue. So. These are some of the questions that,
Is anyone concerned about things not coming before the board that would typically come before the board? Or are you pretty comfortable with that?
Well, we didn't really, the definition of a minor, it's all over the place. Different things.
Yeah, it was the less than 2 acres, 1 or 2 lots. Type 2 action, which I guess you wouldn't necessarily know what that consists of. Okay. Try to clarify that.
well, if it's type 2, it's automatically a minor, right?
Right, they might not be familiar with what.
What type 2 actions are.
Some of the examples.
So do you reuse of
So-
existing buildings?
Boarding houses, a lot of that stuff that we don't.
Well, the renewals and things like that are, which are going away now, more so, are all type 2s.
Yeah, so reuse of existing buildings. So right now, there's some change of use things that would trigger site plan.
Yeah,
Which would not.
like less than
Change from
4,000
retail
square
to-
feet, commercial, office conversion, that kind of thing, is all type 2.
Does the zoning enforcement officer make that determination, which board they go to?
We do,
You do, okay.
or my designate.
So, we're gonna err on caution on, I think it's gonna trigger our planning board review, you're gonna send it to us and.
Right.
Because there are some things that come across our board now,
Right.
why are we even listening to this, That it's good that we're gonna have a separate board, but the bad part about it is that you're gonna spend another night here. Or your designee. Right? Yeah.
We can see if we can get you a cot.
I had, question, let's see. The way, just in context, I thought the order of this section, E, which is auxiliary approval, should go after section F. I just thought, reading it, it made more sense to have site plan approval and supplemental regulations come first, and then have the
Yeah,
auxiliary
yeah.
approvals
So
come
that-
after that. It's just a contextual thing that I looked at when I was reading it. And the other thing I identified with is in the auxiliary approvals, it says if the design variation is not stipulated in table 405.26E, the design variation shall be deemed a major waiver. Design variations are considered deviations to numeric dimensional standards of this chapter. So typically, that would be zoning variances, right? Not area variances. And numerical deviations to numeric dimensional standards would be an area variance. So theoretically, there's no more area variances.
No.
They all go as major waivers to the planning board, the way this is written. In my
But we
head,
still have the area variance.
well, it says if the design variation is not stipulated in table 405.26E, the design variation shall be deemed a major waiver. Design variations are considered deviations to numeric dimensional standards of this chapter.
That is confusing.
Yeah,
You have to. What's the section is that?
8.4,
40,
state.
yeah, it's page 8.4. It's under E, auxiliary approvals, under one,
Waivers.
waiver C. It's confusing.
It doesn't appear in this table. Does not make any sense.
So that's something I just wanted some clarification.
Where's the section of major waivers, defining major waivers?
It's just after that. It's that table you're looking
No,
at.
but the whole point is it's saying it's not stipulated in the table.
Oh, that's,
First section says it's not stipulated.
that's a major waiver?
It says, yeah, if the design variation is not stipulated in table 405.26.
Right.
And does not meet the intent of this chapter. So those are the two preconditions. Then the design variation shall be deemed a major waiver.
Yeah, so we go to the planning board, right?
Right, but so if the design variation is not stipulated in this table,
Yeah, major.
it's deemed a major waiver. So if you want to do a design variation and say you're going to change your setback, and it's not listed in the table, does that become an automatic major waiver? So the area variance then is going to the planning board.
I would say yes.
I would say yes, and I would say that makes sense.
Well, then there's no more area variances going to
You
ZBA.
guys can't do the DVAs, but there's still is the requirement that area variance is required, like where defined.
But it's being, in this, that's what I'm asking.
But
In
it
here,
seems like it's creating the requirement twice, almost. Which kind of makes
not
this,
streamlining. the
yeah, this
process.
makes it kind of pointless there. But, I'll look into it, but that is very confusing. But it doesn't then negate the requirement later on if you need, an area variance, which is required under that section 9. Good night, everyone. Good luck.
Yeah, okay.
That's good.
I mean, I have other minor, I don't know how I keep going. I have in paragraph B there, says, where variations are needed, waiver request letter shall be submitted in writing, blah, blah, blah. It says, the last line says, accompanied by any plans or other necessary visual representation as specified, I think by the planning board. If we're talking about,
Where are you
Page 8.4, B1B.
Yeah.
One paragraph down.
E1C?
D, it's up on the screen.
Okay.
That's fine.
So I put in by the planning board there. The next one, it says the planning administrator will provide, I put may provide.
I think you
I
just
mean, it's
say,
a minor,
I think you just say yes or no.
yeah, I just-
Because the board needs something from your board to indicate what your opinion is.
not necessarily. Or make up their own mind.
Well, they can, but usually, what did you guys?
I'm just
discuss?
thinking
You're
if
thinking,
they're,
like, why is it
if they're
before?
minor, if they're minor waivers, we're not talking major, this is talking minor waivers. I'm thinking time constraint there, so that's why I put may instead of will. That's my thought process there. Okay. Let's see, moving on, okay, we talked about switching. Talked about, let's see. Okay, when there are amendments, it says on page 8.7, under F1B, in all cases where any amendment of any such plan is proposed, the applicant must also secure the approval of the amendment via the minor site plan or major site plan submittal process. So my question there is, if there was a major site plan approval and the amendment is of a minor aspect, can that go to the minor site plan review board, or does that have to go back to major?
The argument could be made.
Or, I mean, that's why I'm asking now, because if it needs to be clarified, here now's the time to clarify it. If it was a minor site plan and becomes a major issue, as far as an amendment, then it might trigger a major site plan review. But can the reverse be true
Which one are you saying?
for the amendments?
So if they already approved the major site plan, and then there was a amendment that is minor.
Does it go back to the
I feel like we
major?
talked about that I feel like we talked about that at a meeting with them. But I can't remember.
And the rationale is to go back to the same board that made the decision, because they have the background and know why they voted the way they voted. But if it's something simple, rather than go through that whole process, it would make sense to streamline to go to minor. Just make the decision.
That would be my thought.
And I know there were
But
certain
can
things
somebody
that,
circumvent a board? Is there a way that if they
like if they knew your board was gonna
could
deny,
deny that they could just kind of play the game and go around and through the back door? Because they know your board will approve it.
So,
so listen, there's a major site plan, it says amendments under the major site plan procedure, it does have amendments to a previously approved site plan shall be acted upon in accordance with this code. So that does kind of address, this is subsection under D procedure on page 8.9. I think that addresses that amendment question.
So we go back to
It
the
would go back to the
major,
major.
okay, even if it's a minor
Yeah, it
issue.
says amendments, yeah.
Okay. 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 I had some typos identified that I won't get involved with here. Under, on 8.9, major site plan procedure, paragraph 4, it says the planning board shall act to approve or disapprove with conditions. Shouldn't that read approve with conditions, or disapprove?
Yeah.
And you don't want to disapprove it and then give
But
it back.
Yeah.
We're denying it, we also have to.
Okay, so that.
Yes,
that's
you
just-
are 100% correct.
Okay.
No and. Approve with conditions or disapprove.
Right.
We've said no, but.
In number 6, they talk
Don't go
about
back.
the performance bond. And I thought that there should be, signage should obviously be added into that. It's not listed. They get very specific about the listing of what's incorporated in a performance bond. Each project has individual little aspects to it, so I think there should be a capital phrase added to that with any related site improvements as deemed appropriate by the city engineer or something to that effect would be language I would add. So I had that identified.
And pre-submission conferences now have a clock associated with it?
Have a
The pre-submission,
where are you?
I'm at the top of 8.9, number 3. Within 6 months following the pre-submission conference.
Yep,
Okay.
that's actually in our current code.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think that's the Gateway Conference, that the Gateway,
Yeah, it's with a staff and things like that.
but there isn't in the current code a time, a clock.
The
for-
pre-submission, yeah,
Okay.
in the current code.
Forward flexible.
Yeah, I mean,
I just wanted to identify that there is, right now we have the 120-day approval. That's been changed in this code, so it's now 1 year. And then they can request up to 2 years, same as they can right now.
up to 2 years after that first year. So 3 total.
No, 2 years from the date of the original approval, so that doesn't change, but the 1 year is a change, which I think is a good change.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out to everybody. I think in the submissions, required submissions, they ask for a narrative to describe the proposal. I think the narrative should also include, it should be stated that it should include any waivers that might be requested. So that's just one of my thoughts there on that page. Next page, 8.12. Let's see. In paragraph D towards the top, towards the, let's see, third line from the bottom, it says, in said, let's see, here's good. In such cases, a period of 60 days shall be granted the applicant for full compliance prior to the renovation of said permit.
Is there revocation supposed to be?
Yeah. So that's word is wrong. Let's see, authorization. Yeah, so it should be revocation, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, in paragraph F, just below that, it says no use allowed by special use permit may be enlarged or increased in intensity without approval of a new special use permit. Special permit renewals without an enlargement or increase in intensity shall be reviewed via the minor site plan review board. So I'm presuming then that that would not get a public hearing? And special permit renewals with proposed enlargements go to the regular planning board, and that would require a public hearing. So I'm just making asking for a clarification there, just for process.
And I'm just looking, and I'll double check the general city order, but my understanding is general special permit require public hearing.
Right.
Whereas, so, and it is the minor site plan, I thought you guys didn't do special permit. It's the minor site plan review board.
Well, all special permits technically go to the right, to the planning board.
Yeah.
But it says.
But this says, this is a renewal.
Oh, renewal.
So with the renewal,
Yeah,
if there are no changes,
Yeah,
not
there's no-
require a public hearing and go to the minor review board.
Yes.
And with changes, require a public hearing and go to the regular planning board, correct? That's clarification of what
That
I'm
is, yes.
asking. Okay, all right. The sign permit section is kind of awkward. Signs, if all signs require minor board review, why is there a second paragraph in here that those signs requiring approval of the planning board? Because the first paragraph says, signs shall not hereafter be erected, structurally altered, enlarged, or relocated within the city except as specifically exempted below, unless approval has been attained from the minor site plan review board. So in my head, I'm thinking all signs go to the minor review board. But the next paragraph says the building safety officer shall not issue a permit for those signs requiring approval of the planning board.
I would hope that there's some signs that can be just building permits. Right? I would,
Well, they would have to get permits.
no, I mean, not be reviewed by any board. If they meet the criteria in the code,
They meet the criteria in the code, they shouldn't have to go before any board.
right, I would.
Right, well, this is saying that all signs would at least go to the minor review
know,
board.
which
You don't want to
add-
every sign in the city of Kingston.
Oh, right, I mean, there's already the
Yeah, but
historic.
if you're just replacing a
I mean,
sign,
if they're in a
same
historic district, they go to they should go to landmarks, but,
Yeah, if there's specific design criteria that they meet, that's in the code, I would.
right, this was the section you sent
Yeah, I
to,
did not get comment yet.
okay, because we sent this out to a couple sign companies that we typically deal with to get feedback, we haven't gotten that yet, so maybe we'll give them another nudge too on this, all right? Let's see. I don't think minor should be involved, major. Okay. Reviewed by the planning board or landmark commission. In the case of a sign that requires approval by the planning board or landmark preservation commission, the minor site plan review board shall refer the application, including a finding as to compliance with all quantitative factors. I mean, why does it even go to the minor review board to begin with? We're talking about trying to streamline this process. So you're saying in this paragraph, again, they're saying it goes to the minor and then the minor then refers it to the planning board or the landmarks. Why can't it just go to a planning board or go to landmarks without going to the minor?
Because they want your office
First.
to make that designation, the building department doesn't want to do it.
But then that begs Kyla's, I mean, you know, why would we be?
So you're saying it
Unless
has
it's
to
in a historic district, like, that's another animal, but if it's.
You're saying you don't want to have to go to one first before it goes, you can go to both sides.
This is saying it goes to the minor review board, they make all the quantitative factors and refer it to landmarks or the planning board.
And then it goes back to the minor
Yeah, I would think it would go to the
site plan.
zoning enforcement officer or the planning director, whoever.
Or my designee. Don't
And
forget
then-
that.
Because you don't want to have to wait for a meeting in order to
I mean,
make a
that's basically
determination.
what we do now is,
Yeah,
That's a staff level
Yeah,
decision.
well, that should be a recommendation if you guys feel, yeah, keep it more procedurally, how do you do it now with the signs and let someone from the building department make that determination.
okay.
Not everything has to go to the board.
I did, okay, let's see, the seeker section in this code, G, on page 8.14. Is that even a necessary? I mean, seeker is seeker. Seeker is applicable. Is this even a necessary section in our zoning code? And it also says in there under number 3, if the planning administrator determines that an application does not conform to the terms of the GEIS for this document, such applications shall be subject to the standard seeker requirements as determined by the zoning enforcement officer?
It is,
Yeah.
Wait, why would the
he's gonna go home.
zoning enforcement officer?
I don't know.
We can probably strike that last part off that.
These, I mean, I don't, you know, these are my comments, but obviously
You concur. I concur.
I'll put them, I have them pretty much right now. Okay. Okay, on page 8.15, non-conforming buildings and uses. Towards the bottom, under number C, or letter C rather, 1C, it says, the last line, this provision shall be liberally interpreted to allow adaptive reuse of existing buildings. I just think that language is not appropriate in the zoning code.
The last sentence of C one.
It's under C, where it says any building other than a sign, the use of which is in conformity with the regulations set forth in this chapter, but which building does not conform to one or more of the requirements hereof, other than the requirements which apply to buildings located in designated historic district, may be altered, enlarged, or rebuilt, but not in a manner that increases the degree of nonconformity. And it says, this provision shall be liberally interpreted. I just don't think that that's zoning language
Well, I mean,
for a code.
but it's giving you the authority to have some wiggle room. So that
Promote use of
promotes use, so if there's one requirement that is not a major requirement.
It's
then you
very
can hold it.
subjective,
It is very subjective.
and it just opens
Lawyers
doors.
literally interpret.
I,
Are you gonna have somebody else say they don't meet the requirements? No.
okay, all right, well, I'll think
Maybe
about that
avoid
one.
Different word than liberally.
Yeah.
On the next page, 8.16, under,
In the spirit.
let's see,
I just think the word
termination.
provision shall be interpreted to allow the effect.
Yeah, there you go.
Something.
Take liberally out, go.
Okay, under termination. Let's see, A and little 3.
What page?
Okay, it says, any use which is non-conforming because it is not located within a building that is fully enclosed shall be discontinued not later than 1 year after the effective date of this chapter. However, no such use will be required to terminate if within said period it shall be fully enclosed within a building, or within said period it shall be surrounded with a solid fence of material and design acceptable to the planning board, which fence shall be 1 foot higher than any material stored outdoors, provided that such fence shall be maintained in good condition at all times. So if there's a pile 15 feet high, is the planning board say a 16-foot high fence is okay?
Make their pile a little smaller, spread it out.
I'm just saying,
I
I don't know legally, how do
Well, there's
really
still this-
realistically do we stand with these termination things anyway?
I think there's still the fence height requirements. I don't think you could have a 30-foot fence. Yeah, but that might not solve the problem.
Well, then it should say said fence shall be.
Yeah, I don't know where that section is, but
Yeah, the
there's
code.
something on
Well, the board has to follow the code.
fences.
They don't have
Right,
the
it
authority
is
to
saying it
expand
goes before the board.
in their decisions. All boards have to follow the code of the city, so just because somebody wants to, I mean, board doesn't have the authority to usurp the statute.
Well, it could be a major waiver.
Yeah, but even if somebody came with us to make a waiver, we
I'm just
can't,
saying,
but we can't
clever.
We
people
can't make
will
a
find their
decision
way.
that's above and beyond what the statute allows us to.
I mean, I just
My,
legally with
Well, if it's requirements, you definitely should be in conformity with those requirements, but again, there may be other things where, where arguably theoretically, there could be circumstances where.
Can you force uses to cease and desist if they don't operate, if they're non-conforming? Because we could be creating non-conforming uses with the adoption of this new code. Something that was conforming is now non-conforming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Does that,
It could lead to some litigation down the line.
I mean, legally, how do you make them go away? Say, I'm sorry, you have a, multifamily home, project. I'm just saying, then it becomes non-conforming. Sorry, you have to cease and desist in so many years?
yeah, that's a taking.
Read that section really.
I don't know what I've read, I'm just telling you. If the city makes it law, doesn't mean it's actually law.
I did, that's kind of as far as I got. Other than my check.
All right, so we're gonna pick up at 8.17 next time.
So next time we meet,
Send out a new section.
yeah, well, let's look at the table of contents real quick.
I think Article 4 is general.
Article 4 and Article 5, or Article 4 alone, Article 5 is street design.
Why don't I send out both? But Article 4 could definitely dominate.
Article 4 is gonna take a while. It's a lot of material.
You have to send out a poll for the weekend.
Well-
Next month.
We should try and set up a meeting within the next couple of weeks, again, because we're working under time constraints. I think the council will give us a little bit anyway, but we can't drag it out. I think you want to keep kind of things fresh in everybody's head.
Well, we'll send dates when the room's available, right?
Yeah,
Because that's the big.
Oaxaca. Mexico. Huh?
With Kristen?
No, that was, just give me advice.
second week of February, how does that look for people?
I'll be back on the 8th.
On the 8th?
What would the date be?
February 2nd is a Thursday,
Are you looking at second
the
week
week,
of Monday?
it would be February 6th, the week of February 6th, so 6th, 7th.
When's the holiday?
The holidays, the, no,
18th or
not
something.
2 weeks after that.
Most people have vacation besides the holiday, both.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be a holiday, it wouldn't be the holiday week.
That week is fine.
I'll try and do something, I'll look at the room availability. Does this room work for people?
That's
The other one
A little roomier.
The other one's a little roomier and you can open that one window,
That's
which
true.
is nice.
If we can avoid Tuesday.
But we'll see. Is that was. You need to do an official adjourn,
I
right?
am closing.
Wait, don't you have to officially adjourn? Or no?
Motion,
Table? Are we
Second.
adjourning or?
those in favor?
Okay.